You're listening to the Alpha's love stories, romantic audiobooks that will make your heart race. Don't forget to subscribe for more enchanting love tales. The air in the clearing tasted of iron, damp earth, and the sharp, sweet decay of fallen leaves. It settled in my lungs, cold and heavy, with every ragged breath I tried to hide. I pressed myself harder against the gnarled bark of the ancient spruce, its rough surface biting into my back through the thin fabric of my gray ceremonial dress. The forest around me was a living, breathing entity of shadow and silver. The moon above was not a gentle goddess tonight. No, it was a merciless, brilliant eye, casting its cold, surgical light upon the stage they had prepared. My heart, it wasn't beating. It was a frantic, trapped bird hurling itself against the cage of my ribs, a desperate drumbeat I was certain echoed through the entire woods. They could all hear it. The 24 members of the Frostfang pack arranged in a loose, whispering circle. They had to hear the thunder of my terror. I shouldn't have come. The memory of my grandmother's voice, soft as worn linen, brushed against my mind. Lyra, my little moonbeam, when the world feels too sharp, too loud, remember your breath. The quietest things hold the deepest roots. But here now, quiet felt like surrender. Gentleness felt like a death sentence. For 2 years I had watched the mates calling from the safety of the tree line. Lyra Reed, the girl with hair the color of faded wheat that refused to be tamed, the girl who smelled of lavender and loam instead of pine and power. The pack healer's shadow, useful, invisible, unchosen. Tonight you will go. Kalen's voice had been so convincing, so tender with false concern. His handsome face, all sharp angles and summer sky eyes, had been the picture of brotherly care. You're 22, Lyra. You cannot watch life from the shadows forever. Let the moon decide your fate. Trust me. Oh, how I had trusted him, foolish, dreaming fool that I was. A shift in the crowd, a ripple of anticipation, and I saw him. Kalen Frost, Beta's son, standing tall and golden at the far edge of the clearing. His arm was draped casually around Selene's shoulders. Selene Vance, whose hair was a cascade of midnight, whose body was a testament to generations of warriors. She was everything our pack revered, and she was laughing, a sound like shattering ice, at something Kalen whispered into her ear. The sight was a physical blow, stealing the air from my already struggling lungs. Lyra Reed, the voice of Elder Hawthorne, cut through the murmurs like a rusty blade. It was devoid of warmth, a formal decree. You have been called. Step forward and open yourself to the bond, or decline and be marked as unclaimed before the pack. This was it, the point of no return. To step into that moon-drenched circle was to offer up my soul for inspection, to hope for a thread of golden recognition from a destined mate. To refuse was to accept a half-life, a permanent place among the pack's forgotten, with no status, no protector, no future. My eyes flicked to Kalen. He was looking at me now, and the expression in his blue eyes, it wasn't encouragement. It was a hunter's calm before the strike. A warning scream echoed in the silence of my own mind, but my feet were already moving. They carried my trembling body forward on legs of water, my simple dress whispering secrets to the frosted grass. The circle of wolves closed around me, their amber-eyed gazes piercing. I saw curiosity in some, a flicker of pity in others, and in most, a bland, predatory indifference. The quiet healer girl was finally providing some entertainment. Open your senses to the night, Elder Hawthorne commanded, his voice echoing in the hushed space. Lower your walls, let the moon's magic reveal what destiny has woven. I closed my eyes. I had to try. With a shuddering inner breath, I did as instructed, dismantling the careful, fragile barriers I kept around my heart. I reached out with that inner sense my grandmother had nurtured, the healer's touch that could feel fever or fear in another's pulse. I searched the void, yearning for that fabled pull, that warm, golden thread of connection I had dreamt of since I was a child. Nothing. Just the vast, empty cold of the night. Then wait, a flicker, not gold, not warmth. Something dark, a slick, oily sensation at the very edge of my awareness. It felt like staring into a deep, still well and seeing something coiled and cold stir in the black water below. It was wrong. It was a primal warning. My eyes flew open. And Kalen was stepping into the circle. Hope, stupid and desperate, flared in my chest, a painful, brilliant spark. It died the instant I saw his face. This wasn't the awestruck look of a male finding his other half. This was a performance. Every line of him was calculated, his expression a mask of tragic revelation. Lyra Reed, he announced, his voice projecting to the farthest watcher. It was the voice he used for pack announcements, clear and ringing. The full moon has shown me a truth tonight. A perfect dead silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. You, he continued, drawing the word out, letting it hang, are not my fated mate. He paused again, letting the first blow land. You will never be anyone's fated mate. I felt the words hit me, each one a stone striking my flesh. You are too weak, he declared, his voice dripping with a pity that was more cruel than any shout. Too soft, your spirit is muted, you cling to human comforts, to healing herbs when you should crave the hunt. You are a whisper in a pack of howls. He took a step closer and his next words dropped, meant for me but carrying in the stillness. You shame the wolf within you. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I locked my knees, my fingers finding the cold metal of my grandmother's pendant hidden beneath my dress, a simple circle inscribed with a winding vine and a single star. Strength is a quiet growl, she'd said. I'll end you tonight, Lyra. His voice was now a soft, intimate poison, not with claw or tooth, with truth. They will all see the emptiness I see, and you will have nowhere left to stand. A soft, mean laugh escaped Selene, who had drifted to the edge of the circle. Poor little healer. Did you truly believe someone like you could be chosen? But her mockery was cut off, abruptly, savagely. The temperature in the clearing plummeted, so fast, so violently that a visible wave of frost crackled across the grass, racing outward from the northern tree line. It wasn't the gentle frost of autumn. This was the deep, killing cold of the heart of winter, of a place where light itself went to die. Every wolf in the circle froze, not in stillness, in utter, primal paralysis. A fear so ancient it bypassed thought and seized the spine. The air grew dense, hard to breathe, carrying a new scent, ozone, ancient stone, and the cold, clean smell of the void between stars. From the deepest shadows of the pines, where no moonlight ever touched, a figure emerged. He did not walk, he flowed, like shadow given purpose, like a glacier on the move, inevitable, unhurried, and utterly silent. Power radiated from him in waves, a pressure that made my ears pop and my bones ache. Alpha King Zephyr Blackwood. A name spoken in whispers, in legends, the sovereign who ruled from a distant, mist-shrouded keep, who hadn't walked among the lower packs in living memory. He was a story used to frighten pups into obedience, and he was here. He was taller than any man I had ever seen, his shoulders impossibly broad beneath a long black coat that seemed to swallow the moonlight. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, falling to his jaw. His face, it was stark, beautiful, and terrifying, as if carved from granite and ice. But his eyes, they glowed, not with the amber of our pack, but with a haunting, shimmering silver blue, like moonlight on a frozen lake. Every wolf, including Elder Hawthorne and a now ashen-faced Kaelin, dropped their gaze or bowed their head. A wave of submission rippled through the clearing. Every wolf except me. I was trapped, mesmerized. His impossible gaze swept the scene, the circle, the pack, Kaelin's triumphant stance, my own small, shivering form, and settled on me. It felt like being pinned by twin stars, seen down to the marrow of my soul. He took 3 slow, deliberate steps into the clearing, the frost crunching under his boots. The sound was obscenely loud in the silence. Fascinating, he murmured, his voice, it was the sound of distant thunder, of deep earth shifting. It vibrated in my chest. I was drawn here by the scent of a boundary dispute, a minor territorial grudge, but instead, his head tilted, those luminous eyes narrowing on Kaelin. I find this petty theater. Kaelin looked as if he might be sick. My king, it was only. You, Zephyr interrupted, his voice softening into something far more dangerous. You threatened this female, I will end you tonight. He repeated Kaelin's words perfectly, his tone a masterful, chilling mockery. Such finality from one whose own claws have yet to be properly blooded. Kaelin tried to speak, but only a choked sound emerged. You meant to break her, Zephyr stated. It was not a question. To shatter her spirit before witnesses, to ensure her exile from any semblance of rank or safety, a social execution. He took a step closer to Kaelin, who flinched as if struck. Tell me, Beata's son, what great crime did this gentle healer commit to warrant such a meticulously cruel performance? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Kaelin's mouth opened and closed. Selene had melted back into the crowd, disappearing entirely. When no answer came, the Alpha King's head turned. Those glacial eyes found mine again, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. What is your name? He asked, and his voice, though still commanding, had lost its razor's edge. It took me 2 tries to force sound out. Lyra, I whispered, then finding a shred of strength from somewhere deep, Lyra Reed, my king. Lyra, he said, tasting the name, and something unreadable flickered in the depths of his silver-blue gaze. Walk with me. He turned his back on the entire stunned pack, on Kaelin's humiliation, on Elder Hawthorne's shock, and moved toward the forest. It was not a request, it was a royal decree that had just rewritten my destiny. For a heartbeat, I stood paralyzed. Then, with a final glance at the life I was leaving behind, a life that had just tried to strangle me, I followed the Alpha King into the waiting, unknown darkness. The last thing I heard was Elder Hawthorne's sharp, indrawn breath of shock. The last thing I felt was the weight of 100 stairs on my back. And then the forest swallowed us whole. The pines closed around us like a living fortress, their boughs heavy and sighing. Within 3 steps, the torchlight from the clearing vanished, swallowed by the immense velvet dark of the ancient woods. I stumbled on a root, my body still trembling from the adrenaline, from the sheer impossible shock of the last few minutes. King Zephyr moved ahead of me with a predator's silent grace, a deeper shadow among shadows. He didn't speak. The only sounds were the soft crush of his boots on the needle-strewn path and the ragged, too loud rhythm of my own breathing. I followed, my mind a frantic, spinning wheel. What was happening? Where was he taking me? Why had he, a king of legends, intervened in something as pitifully small as my ruin? My thoughts spiraled, each more terrifying than the last. Was this a worse fate? Taken by a being of such immense, cold power for reasons I couldn't fathom. He stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with his back. We were in a small, natural glade where a thin stream cut a silver path through the moss. Moonlight filtered down in shattered pieces through the canopy. He turned, and I found myself standing far too close, having to tilt my head back to meet those impossible eyes. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. The power wasn't just around him, it seemed to be woven into the very air he breathed, a silent, constant hum that made the small hairs on my arms stand on end. He studied me, his gaze scanning my face, my torn dress, the way my hands clutched at my grandmother's pendant beneath the fabric. "You are afraid," he stated. His voice was lower here, more intimate, a rumble that vibrated in my chest. "Yes," I whispered. There was no point in lying. He could probably smell the fear on me like perfume. "Of me," he asked, his head tilting slightly, "or of the unknown you now walk into?" "Both," I admitted, the word escaping in a shaky breath. "Neither. I don't understand. Why did you do that?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze holding mine. "You truly do not see it, do you?" "See what?" Desperation tinged my voice. "I see a king who stopped a public humiliation. I am grateful, but I am also lost." "A public execution," he corrected softly, the words precise and chilling. "What was done to you in that circle was not rejection, it was an eradication. He sought to erase your place in your world entirely." He paused, watching the understanding and the fresh pain dawn in my eyes. "Tell me, Lyra Reed, what did you do to earn such focused hatred from your Beata's son?" The question was a blade twisting in the wound. I looked away, my throat tight. I cared for him since we were pups. He was kind once, after my grandmother died. He was there. He made me feel seen. He made me hope. The confession was ashes in my mouth. "He made you hope," Zephyr repeated, his voice devoid of judgment, "so that he could later use that hope as the very weapon to destroy you. He built you a tower of dreams just to enjoy the spectacle of its collapse." He turned and began walking alongside the stream. "I have walked this earth for centuries, little healer. I recognize the architecture of cruelty. His was particularly artistic." His words painted the truth in colors so vivid it made me nauseous. All of Kaelin's gentle words, his fleeting touches, his promises of protection, they were just layers of paint on the trap. I had been a fool. "Your pack will be unsettled by my intervention," Zephyr continued, his tone shifting to one of cool analysis. "My pack," the words felt alien. "You think I can go back there after that?" He glanced at me, a silver-blue flash in the dark. "Do you wish to?" The answer came immediately from a place of raw instinct deeper than thought. "No." "Then they are your former pack," he stated, as if it were that simple. Perhaps for King it was. "You did not think I would leave you there, did you? A pawn sacrificed in a game, left broken on the board." I didn't know what to think. "Whether I wished it or not, the moment I stepped from those trees and claimed your side, you became my responsibility," he said, his voice firm. "To abandon you now would be to show a fatal flaw in my authority, a crack in the foundation for others to exploit. You are under the Blackwood protection now." So that was it, not rescue, politics, cold, hard calculation. The bitter disappointment that flooded me was a surprise. What had I expected? That a mythical king had felt a pang of chivalrous pity for the pathetic healer? I straightened my spine, clutching the pendant. I see, I said, forcing my voice to be as neutral as his. Where are you taking me then? My retinue makes camp a half-mile north. We will reach it before true dawn. You will be given shelter, security, and time. Time for what? To decide what path you wish to walk from here. He stopped again, gesturing to a fallen log beside the stream. Sit, Lyra, you are trembling from more than the cold. Exhaustion was seeping into the spaces where shock and fear had been, making my limbs leaden. I sank onto the moss-covered wood gratefully. After a moment, he sat beside me, not close, but his presence was a tangible force, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. You have options, he said, gazing at the trickling water. Remain with my court as a protected ward. Your skills as a healer would be valued. Or with my seal, you could seek a place in a different pack, far from here, where your past does not follow you. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Or you could return to the Frostfang and face the consequences of tonight. That is no option at all, I said, the words flat and sure. I know, he replied, and I thought I saw a flicker of that same understanding again. But you needed to hear yourself say it, to accept the totality of what was done. You are not just leaving a place, Lyra. You are leaving a version of yourself that they tried to murder tonight. His perception was a lance piercing the numb shell I was trying to build. Tears, hot and furious, pricked at my eyes again. I would not cry, I would not. Why lavender? He asked suddenly. The question was so unexpected it jolted me from my despair. What? You carry the scent of lavender and rich earth, healing herbs, but beneath it, he leaned infinitesimally closer, his nostrils flaring slightly. There is something else, something like the first breath of air after a lightning strike, ozone and rain. A strange shiver went through me. I don't know what that is. He leaned back, his gaze turning speculative. No, perhaps you don't. He stood, fluid and effortless. Come, the camp is near. I took the hand he offered without thinking. The moment our skin touched, it happened. A jolt, not of fear, not of shock. It was a current of pure silver energy that shot from his palm up my arm, exploding in my chest like a silent star. It was cold and bright and terrifyingly alive. It wasn't the golden warmth of the mate bond tales. This was the heart of a glacier, the core of a winter storm, vast, powerful, and mesmerizing. Zephyr's fingers tightened around mine, his grip firm. His luminous eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, the cool composure shattering into genuine, profound astonishment. We stood frozen, connected by that electric touch, the forest around us holding its breath. He released my hand as if burned, the motion swift. The connection snapped, leaving a strange, resonant ache in its wake. His expression smoothed back into its regal mask, but his eyes still churned with that unsettled silver light. We should go, he said, his voice slightly rough. He turned and continued walking, his stride a fraction quicker than before. I stared at my tingling hand, then at his retreating back, my heart hammering a new, frantic rhythm. What was that? What had just passed between us in that single, electric touch? The camp emerged from the gloom like a vision from an old tale. Tents of dark, durable fabric were arranged in a perfect defensive circle around a central fire that burned with peculiar, smokeless blue flames. Guards in wolf form patrolled the perimeter, their eyes gleaming like coins in the dark. They watched our approach, and I saw recognition and immediate deep deference in the way they lowered their heads. A woman emerged from the largest tent. She was tall and lean, her silver-streaked black hair braided tightly back from a severe, handsome face. She moved like a blade, efficient, sharp, and deadly. Her eyes, a pale, piercing gray, swept over me in one swift, assessing glance before returning to Zephyr. "Sire," she said, her voice clipped and clear, "you were gone longer than anticipated. We were moments from forming search parties." "Unnecessary, Commander Valerius," Zephyr replied, his tone dismissing the concern. "This is Lyra Reed. She requires quarters, appropriate clothing, and your personal assurance of her safety. See to it." Commander Valerius's gaze returned to me, the assessment now tinged with a spark of keen interest. "Of course, the guest tent beside yours stands ready." She turned to me, and her expression, while not warm, was not unkind. "Come, child, you look as though you faced down a ghost." I glanced at Zephyr, but he was already moving toward his own tent. "Rest, Lyra," he said over his shoulder, the command soft but absolute. "We will speak again at sunset." And then he was gone, leaving me standing in the heart of a strange, militarized camp with a fierce-looking commander, the memory of an electric touch burning on my skin, and the dizzying certainty that my life had just been unmoored from everything I had ever known. Commander Valerius led me to a small but sturdy tent. Inside, a bedroll, a trunk, and a brazier glowing with warmth awaited. She produced clothes, soft, dark leggings, a thick wool tunic, boots. "You'll want to clean up," she said, her tone practical. "There's a heated basin coming for washing. The latrine is behind the large oak within the ward boundaries. Do not venture beyond the perimeter stones." "Thank you, Commander," I managed to say. My mind was reeling. May I ask, why did he intervene? Truly, a king doesn't involve himself in pack squabbles. Valeria studied me for a long, silent moment. Something shifted in her steely eyes. "You truly don't know, do you?" "Know what?" The question was almost a plea. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Not my tale to tell, girl, but I will say this: King Zephyr does not act without purpose, and he has not shown personal interest in anyone's affairs for longer than you have been alive." Her gaze intensified. "Whatever he saw in that clearing tonight, whatever scent he caught on the wind, it was significant, remember that." She left before I could ask more, leaving me alone with the hum of the strange camp and the echo of her cryptic words. Personal interest, a scent on the wind. I changed slowly, the soft fabric feeling alien against my skin. As the first gray light of dawn painted the tent canvas, I replayed the moment our hands touched, that shocking, silver current, that look of utter surprise on the Alpha King's timeless face. He hadn't just saved me out of political convenience. Something had happened in that clearing, something that had drawn a king from the shadows, and something had passed between us in the forest that had shaken us both. As I finally lay down on the bedroll, exhaustion pulling me under, my last conscious thought was not of Kaelin's betrayal or my lost home. It was of moonlight on frozen lakes, of a touch like winter lightning, and of a pair of silver-blue eyes that had seen something in me I could not see myself. The game had changed, and I was now a piece on a board I did not understand, held by a player whose motives were a mystery wrapped in shadow and cold, electric fire. Sleep took me deep and dreamless, but the resonance of that touch hummed in my veins, a silent, waiting promise of storms to come. I awoke to the sound of arguing. Not the loud, chaotic shouting of a pack dispute, but the sharp, clipped, venomously polite tones of people who wield words like scalpels. The voices filtered through the canvas of my tent, low and urgent, pulling me from a heavy, dreamless sleep. Disoriented, I blinked at the unfamiliar, dappled light on the tent wall. Memory crashed back, the clearing, the frost, the king, the camp. My heart gave a painful lurch. I had slept through the entire day, the light was the soft gold of late afternoon. The voices outside grew clearer, more heated. "Is an unprecedented overreach, sire," a man's voice, cultured and tight with barely contained outrage. "You cannot simply pluck a random she-wolf from a subordinate pack ceremony. The protocols, the established hierarchies, they exist for a reason." "I am aware of protocol, Counselor Arden," King Zephyr's voice. It was calm, but it carried a chill that made me shiver even in my bedroll. It was the voice of absolute authority, and it brooked no dissent. "With respect, are you," a woman's voice now, smooth as oiled silk, dripping with condescension. "My sources in Frostfang report a simple, if unfortunate, rejection. The girl was found lacking. It is a private pack matter. For the crown to intervene sets a dangerous precedent. It makes us look capricious." "Your sources were not present, Lady Moira." This was Commander Valerius, her tone a honed blade. "I have debriefed the king. The Beta's son orchestrated a public shaming with intent to destroy her standing. That moves from private rejection into public persecution. It violates the covenant of pack dignity." I sat up slowly, my blood running cold. They were discussing me, arguing over me as if I were a stray puppy, a political problem, a troublesome object. "The covenant is for wolves of standing," the man, Counselor Arden, retorted. "For proven warriors, for bloodlines, not for a nameless healer who couldn't secure a mate. Cruelty, while regrettable, is a pack's internal affair. We cannot have the king acting as a nursemaid for every lowborn wolf with a bruised heart." Nameless, lowborn, bruised heart, the words were arrows, each finding its mark. "Enough." One word from Zephyr. It was not loud, it was quieter than the others had been, but it fell into the space between them like a monolith of ice, silencing everything. The very air seemed to freeze. When he spoke again, his voice was a deadly whisper. "I intervened because I chose to. My reasons are my own. Lyra Reed is under the direct protection of the Blackwood Crown. To challenge that protection is to challenge my throne directly. Is that understood?" A long, strained pause. I could imagine them bowing their heads, forced into submission by the sheer weight of his will. Murmured, reluctant assents drifted to my ears. Yes, sire. Good, now leave me, all of you. Footsteps retreated, crisp and hurried on the pine needles. I waited, my heart pounding against my ribs, unsure if I should pretend to still be asleep. You can cease pretending, Lyra, Zephyr's voice came, much closer now, right outside my tent flap. Your heartbeat has been a frantic drum for the past 5 minutes. Heat flooded my cheeks, busted. I pushed the flap aside and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. He stood a few paces away, his hands clasped behind his back. He had changed from his formal coat into simpler, dark attire, but it did nothing to diminish his imposing presence. Commander Valerius lingered nearby, her expression unreadable. I apologize, I said, my voice small. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Do not apologize for hearing yourself discussed as if you were livestock, he said, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. You have a right to know what is being said in the shadows. It is better to hear the poison than to wonder at its taste. Who were they? I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. Counselor Arden, head of territorial law, Lady Moira, liaison to the Eastern Pax. A faint, sardonic twist touched his lips. They believe they know how to rule an empire better than the king who has held it together for 3 centuries, a common ailment among courtiers. Do they? The question slipped out, bold and immediate. I regretted it instantly. His silver-blue eyes fixed on me, not with anger but with a spark of genuine curiosity. What do you think, Lyra Reed? I swallowed, choosing my words with care. I think a king who has ruled that long does not make decisions lightly, and I gathered my courage, meeting his gaze. I think laws that allow cruelty in the name of internal affairs are laws that need examining. A slow, deliberate blink, a subtle shift in his stance. It was the only sign that my words had struck a chord. Spoken like someone who has never had to balance the stability of 30 packs across a continent, but spoken with conviction. Walk with me. It was becoming our ritual. I fell into step beside him as he led us away from the tents, along a path that wound up a gentle, wooded rise. The forest here was different, older, quieter, the trees massive and bearded with moss. Tell me of your life in Frostfang, he said after a while. Not the pain of last night, the before, the structure. How does a pack produce a healer with your sensitivity and then discard her so carelessly? So I told him. I painted a picture of Beta Frost, a stern but fair leader slowly growing distant. I spoke of the Council of Elders, traditionalists who saw strength only in tooth and claw, who viewed healing as a necessary but slightly shameful magic, like mending a torn banner instead of weaving a new one. I described the rigid hierarchy that placed warriors at the pinnacle and everyone else, hunters, crafters, healers, in descending tiers of respect. My grandmother was the exception, I said, my voice softening with memory. She had trained with healers from beyond the mountains, learned things our pack had forgotten. The beta respected her, he needed her, but when she did, I shrugged, the old loneliness of familiar ache. I was just her apprentice, too young, too quiet, my methods were too gentle for their taste. Yet you stayed. Where else was I to go? The bitterness surprised me. I had no other skills that anyone valued, no family, no connections beyond our borders. I thought if I worked hard enough, proved myself indispensable enough, they would have to see me, to accept me. You thought one of them would look past their own blindness, he finished, his voice quiet. The beta's son, specifically. You thought your gentle heart would be a beacon to him, not a flaw to be exploited. The accuracy of his insight was breathtaking and painful, foolish. Hopeful, he corrected, and there was no mockery in the word. To hope for belonging is the most fundamental wolf instinct there is. It is not foolish, it is what keeps packs together. Their failure was in teaching you that your particular kind of belonging was worthless. We reached the top of the rise. A vista opened before us, a rolling sea of endless pine forests shrouded in mist, stretching to distant, snow-capped mountains that pierced the orange-tinged sky. The scale of it, the sheer wild majesty, stole my breath. This is the heart of it, Zephyr said, gesturing to the vast landscape. The Blackwood territories, my charge, to keep this balance, to ensure the strong do not utterly consume the gentle, for a pack of nothing but claws soon starves or tears itself apart. I looked from the breathtaking view to his stark profile. Is that why you brought me here, to be a symbol, the gentle healer in the king's court, to show you value more than warriors? He turned to me fully and his gaze was intense, searching. I brought you here because when I saw you in that circle, standing alone in a storm of malice, you did not crumble, you did not snarl, you absorbed it. You took their cruelty and you held it and you did not let it twist you. That is not weakness, Lyra. That is a strength so rare it is often mistaken for fragility. His words washed over me, a bomb and a challenge. Before I could respond, a series of sharp, urgent howls erupted from the direction of the camp below, not signals, alarms. Zephyr's head snapped toward the sound, his body shifting instantly from contemplative sovereign to battle-ready predator. In the space of a heartbeat, Commander Valerius was there, bursting from the trees, her expression grim. "Sire, a Frostfang delegation approaches, under a challenge banner." The world seemed to tilt, my stomach turned to ice. "They are demanding," Valerius continued, her pale eyes flicking to me with a mix of pity and resolve, "the immediate return of stolen pack property. They claim Lyra's removal was an unlawful abduction during a sacred rite, that her presence here violates territorial accords." Pack property, the words were a physical blow, not a person, not even a named wolf, property. Zephyr's expression didn't change, but the air around him grew several degrees colder. How many? 20. Beta Frost leads them, his son is with him. Kalen, of course, he wasn't done, he couldn't let me have even this escape. He had to drag me back to finish what he started, to prove his dominance even over the king's will. Panic, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, my fingers digging into my own flesh. "Lyra," Zephyr said, turning to me, his voice was calm, absolute, "you do not have to face this. Return to the camp with Valerius, stay in your tent, I will handle." "No." The word left my lips clear and firm, cutting through my fear. I straightened my spine, meeting his surprised gaze. "No, I will not hide, I am done hiding. Whatever happens, I will face it. I will not let them decide my fate from the shadows again." Something fierce and approving flashed in his silver-blue eyes. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Then stay close to me, and let the king speak." We descended the hill together. The camp was now a armed enclave, every guard in position, tension thrumming in the air like a plucked bowstring. At the edge of the ward stones, the Frostfang delegation stood. Beta Frost looked older than I remembered, his face etched with lines of strain and stern resolve. Behind him stood 20 warriors, including Kalen. My former almost mate stood tall, his chin lifted in defiant arrogance, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the nervous flicker in his eyes as they landed on Zephyr. Selene was not there. She was likely deemed unnecessary for this diplomatic retrieval. "Alpha King Zephyr," Beta Frost inclined his head, the gesture of respect barely meeting the requirement. "We come on urgent business. Last night, during a sacred mating ceremony, a member of my pack disappeared. Lyra Reed. Witnesses confirm she departed with you. We are here to retrieve her." "Retrieve," Zephyr repeated, the word dripping with frost. "An interesting choice. She is under my protection, Beta. She came willingly." "She is pack, sire," Frost insisted, his voice hardening. "Her departure without formal release violates our sovereignty under the territorial accords. I am certain this is a misunderstanding, but protocol." "Protocol," Zephyr interrupted, his voice dropping into that deadly quiet register, "demands that pack members not be subjected to orchestrated psychological torture designed to break their spirit and erase their future. What I witnessed in your clearing was not a rejection, it was an annihilation." The Frostfang wolves shifted uneasily. Kalen's confident mask cracked, revealing a flash of panic. "My son's words were harsh," Beta Frost conceded, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Unnecessarily so, but the right to reject is sacred. It is a private pack matter." "Private?" Zephyr took a single step forward. The temperature plummeted visibly, our breath fogged in the air. He did not simply decline a bond. He systematically dismantled her worth before the entire pack, threatened her existence, and created a scenario where her only paths were degradation or exile. "That is a breach of the covenant. That voids your claim of pack. She has no standing to return to." "She is still under my authority," Frost ground out, but the conviction was bleeding from his voice. This was becoming a fight he could not win, "unless you are formally claiming her, sire, which would require." "I am claiming her." The declaration rang out, absolute and final, echoing off the trees. It was not the claim of a mate, it was the claim of a king, under royal protection, answerable only to the Blackwood crown. Challenge that claim if you dare, Beta Frost. But know that to challenge it is to declare war on my throne. The silence was absolute, profound. Beta Frost's face paled. He was a good leader, a practical man, he knew the math. 20 Frostfang warriors against the Blackwood Royal Guard, against the legendary power of the king himself. It was suicide for his pack. But to back down was to lose face, to acknowledge his son's monstrous behavior, to let a king take one of his own. I held my breath, my grandmother's pendant a cold, comforting weight against my sternum. Finally, with visible effort, Beta Frost bowed his head lower this time, a gesture of submission. As you say, my king, we will not contest your claim. He turned to me, and in his eyes I saw not malice but a deep, weary regret. Lyra Reed, you are formally and forever released from the Frostfang pack. May the moon guide you to a kinder path. It was over, the final severance. I felt no pain, only a vast, echoing relief, as if a chain I had not even felt was finally unlocked and dropped away. Thank you, Beta, I whispered. Kalen was staring at me, his face a mask of pure, impotent fury. His perfect plan, his grand humiliation, had not just failed, it had catapulted me into the orbit of a king. He had made me an exile, and the king had made me a ward of the most powerful court in the land. His victory had turned to ashes in his mouth. The Frostfang wolves turned and melted back into the forest, a defeated, silent retreat. As they disappeared, the last fragile thread connecting me to my old life snapped. I was packless, unclaimed, and irrevocably bound to the Alpha King's world. Zephyr turned to me. The regal mask was back, but in the depths of his luminous eyes I saw something new, something complex and burning with intensity. Come, he said, his voice a soft command that brooked no argument. We must talk now. The look in his eyes told me the conversation with the Frostfang was only the beginning. The real revelation, the true reason for all of this, was about to be unveiled, and the electric memory of our touch in the woods hummed between us, a silent promise that nothing would ever be simple again. King Zephyr did not lead me back to the camp. Instead, he guided me deeper into the old forest, to a place where the ancient trees stood as silent, mossy sentinels and the air smelled of damp stone and deep, still water. He stopped before a small, perfectly circular pool fed by a trickling spring. The water was so clear it was like a window into another world, reflecting the darkening indigo of the twilight sky and the first brave pinpricks of stars. The silence between us was thick, charged with the aftermath of the confrontation and the unspoken tension that had hummed between us since our hands had touched. He stood by the water's edge, his back to me for a long moment, his shoulders set in a rigid line. Sit, Lyra, he said finally, his voice low. He gestured to a smooth, flat rock beside the pool. I obeyed, the stone cold through my borrowed leggings. He remained standing, his hands clasped behind him, a silhouette against the deepening night. He was a king holding court with the stars as his witness. I must tell you a story, he began, and his voice took on a different quality, older, heavier, as if dredged from the depths of centuries. It is not a story for the court or for counselors, it is the truth of why I was traveling near Frostfang territory. The truth of what I have been searching for. He turned then, and his silver-blue eyes found mine in the gloom. They glowed with their own ethereal light. 3 months ago I had a dream, but dream is too small a word, it was a vision, sent by the moon herself, clear and undeniable, branded onto my soul. He paused, as if even recounting it required great effort. I saw a clearing much like the one last night. I saw a she-wolf with hair like autumn wheat standing alone, surrounded by wolves who were blind to her light. I saw her wear a pendant, a circle with a vine and a single star, and I saw her hands, gentle hands, stained with earth and purpose. My breath caught, my fingers flew to my grandmother's pendant, hidden beneath my tunic. The cold metal seemed to burn against my skin. In the vision, I felt a pull, he continued, his gaze locked on mine, unblinking. A recognition so profound it was like remembering a name I had never known. It was a pull I have never felt in 300 years of life, not once. The world seemed to shrink to the space between us, to the sound of his voice and the frantic beating of my own heart. For 3 months I have traveled from pack to pack, following whispers, following instinct, searching for the female from my vision. I disguised my purpose as border inspections, treaty reviews, anything to mask the true, desperate quest. He took a slow step toward me. Last night, a disturbance on the edge of Frostfang land drew my guards' attention. A minor territorial gripe, they said, but I felt a tug, a compulsion. I went myself. Another step, the air grew colder, crisper. And I saw you, the words were a soft exhale, filled with awe and something like fear. I saw the wheat-colored hair, I saw the pendant glinting at your throat in the torchlight, I saw the wolves circling you like vultures, and I felt it again, that pull, that absolute, terrifying recognition. My mind reeled, trying to process the impossible. You're saying you were looking for me. I am saying, he said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper, that for 300 years I have been alone, truly alone. My bloodline, it is ancient. Cursed, some say, we do not feel the mate bond as others do. We do not get golden threads or warm whispers. Our bonds, if they come at all, they are born in winter. They feel like the heart of a storm, like the stillness at the center of a blizzard. They are not comfortable, they are not gentle, they are a seismic shift in the soul. He was close now, close enough that I could see the faint, almost imperceptible pulse at his temple, could feel the chill that radiated from him, not unfriendly but elemental like the air atop a mountain. Last night in the clearing, when you opened yourself to the bond, what did you feel, Lyra? Tell me the truth, before Kaelin spoke, in that moment of silence. The memory rose, vivid and chilling. Cold, I breathed the word, a ghost on my lips. It was dark, like looking into a frozen lake and seeing something vast and ancient moving in the black depths below the ice. It wasn't warmth, it was awe and terror. A profound stillness settled over him. A look of shattered hope and dawning certainty warred in his luminous eyes. And when we touched, he prompted, his voice barely audible, by the stream, what did you feel then? Lightning, I whispered, my own voice trembling. Silver lightning, cold and bright. It burned, but it didn't hurt. It felt like waking up. He closed his eyes, a shudder running through his powerful frame. When he opened them again, they were blazing. The bond of my bloodline presents first as a shadow, a deep, cold pull, a warning of the power to come. The connection, the touch, it ignites it, turns the shadow into lightning. He knelt before me then, bringing himself to my eye level. It was an act of stunning humility from a king. He looked into my eyes, his gaze stripping away every pretense, every shield I had left. Lyra Reed, he said, and his voice was thick with an emotion I could not name. The moon in her wisdom did not grant me a golden mate, she forged me a queen of winter. My vision was not a curiosity, it was a summons. A revelation. He reached out, his hand hovering near my cheek, not touching, but I could feel the static charge of his nearness. Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me you felt only fear in the clearing, only shock at my touch. Tell me honestly, and I will never speak of this again. I will guard you as my ward until the end of your days, and you will want for nothing but this truth. The air crackled between us. The memory of the frozen lake in my soul, the searing silver of his touch, they weren't just memories. They were alive inside me, a new humming frequency in my blood. To deny it would be to deny my own senses, to lie to the very core of who I was becoming. But to admit it, it was to step off a cliff into an unknown, frozen sky. I thought of my grandmother, strength is a quiet growl. I thought of Kaelin's cruel laughter, of the pack's indifferent eyes. I thought of the vast, lonely power in the king kneeling before me, who had searched for centuries for something he thought he would never find. My quiet growl found its voice. I feel it, I said, the words clear and strong in the twilight. I have felt it since the clearing, since your hand took mine. I didn't understand it, but I feel it. It's like a second heartbeat, cold and wild and mine. The words hung in the air, a confession and a covenant. Something in Zephyr's face fractured, the last vestige of the untouchable king dissolved, revealing a raw, vulnerable astonishment, a hope so long buried it was painful to behold. His hovering hand gently cupped my cheek. The contact was electric but different this time, not a shock but a completion. The silver lightning was there, but it flowed now, a circuit finally closed. It was cold, yes, but it was a clean, vital cold that sharpened my senses, that made the stars above seem brighter, the sounds of the forest more distinct. Through it I could feel the echo of his emotions, a torrent of relief, a fierce, protective joy, and beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made my soul ache. Lyra, he breathed, my name a prayer on his lips. His other hand came up, framing my face, holding me as if I were the most precious, fragile thing in his vast empire. My mate. The word in his voice, with the power of the bond shimmering between us, did not feel strange. It felt like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. But what does this mean? I asked, my mind struggling to catch up with my soul's certainty. It means, he said, his thumbs stroking my cheeks with a tenderness that belied his strength, that you are not my ward, you are my equal, my destined partner, the queen to my king. It means the game Counselor Arden and Lady Moira are playing has just become infinitely more dangerous for them. The practical implications crashed down. The court, the other packs, they will never accept a lowborn healer as queen. A slow, predatory smile touched his lips, the first true smile I had seen from him. It transformed his face from beautiful ice to something lethally alive. They will have no choice, the moon has spoken, the bond is forged, their acceptance is not required. Their obedience is. The smile faded, replaced by solemn intensity. But it will not be easy, Lyra. There will be challenges, plots, attempts to separate us, to discredit you, to make you, and through you me, appear weak. You must be prepared. I looked into his winterfire eyes, felt the steady, cold pulse of the bond in my chest, my new, unshakable truth. The girl who had been too gentle was gone. In her place was a woman forged in public humiliation, saved by Winter's king and chosen by the moon herself. I am done being unprepared, I said, and I felt the bond chime in agreement, a chord of silver strength. I am done being prey. His gaze burned with pride. Then we face it together, as we were meant to. A distant, frantic howl shattered the moment, then another, not from the camp but from further east deep in the forest, alarm calls laced with panic. Zephyr was on his feet in an instant, pulling me up with him. His head was cocked, listening. That's not a perimeter breach, he muttered, his eyes narrowing. That's pain. Commander Valerius materialized from the trees, her face grim. Sire, scouts reported disturbance 5 miles east. A traveling merchant party from the Silvermane pack was ambushed. There are wounded, many wounded. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. The healer in me surged forward, pushing aside queen and mate and fear. Take me to them, I said. The look he gave me then was one of absolute, unwavering respect. He nodded to Valerius. Assemble a guard and the field healers, we ride now. Lyra comes with me. As we moved swiftly back toward the camp, the new bond thrumming between us like a plucked wire, I realized the first test had already arrived. It was not a political trap or a courtly insult. It was blood in the darkness and cries in the night. It was the world reminding us that crowns and bonds did not stop suffering. And as the healer's purpose ignited within me, I knew this was where I would begin, not with a throne but with my hands in the earth, trying to mend what was broken. The moon had forged a queen of winter, but first she would have to be a healer in the dark. We rode through the night, a silent, grim procession of shadows. King Zephyr led on a massive, midnight black stallion that moved with uncanny silence. I rode beside him on a smaller, sure-footed mare, Commander Valerius a watchful presence at my other flank. Behind us, a dozen royal guards and 2 field healers from Zephyr's retinue followed, their faces set. The forest was a tunnel of blackness, the world reduced to the sound of hooves on soft earth, the jingle of harness, and the cold, clean scent of the pines. The bond between Zephyr and me was a steady, low hum in my chest, a compass needle pointing unerringly to his presence. Through it I could feel his focused intensity, his mind already racing through possibilities. Who, why, what threat did this pose to the territory's peace? But I also felt his watchfulness over me, not as a fragile thing but as a vital, newly connected part of himself he was fiercely determined to protect. It was a strange, heady sensation. We found the ambush site in a narrow gully where the path crossed a shallow stream. The scene was one of quiet horror under the stark light of the guards' raised torches. 3 merchant wagons lay overturned, their contents bolts of cloth, sacks of grain, pottery, smashed and scattered like bones. The air stank of blood, fear, and the coppery scent of violent magic. 5 wolves in human form were huddled together, wounded and shell-shocked, their Silvermane pack markings clear on their torn cloaks. 2 others lay deathly still on the blood-soaked ground. A tall, gray-haired man with a deep gash across his brow staggered to his feet as we dismounted. He saw Zephyr's insignia and fell to one knee, wincing in pain. My king, thank the moon. Rise, Zephyr commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the wounded. Report. We were set upon an hour past sundown, the man gasped, clutching his side. Not wolves, not holy, they moved wrong, smelled of rot and burnt ozone. They came from the trees, silent until they were upon us. They took the silver shipment, ignored the food, the cloth, just the silver. How many? 8, maybe 10. They fought with claws but also with something else. The air crackled where they struck. My son, his voice broke as he gestured to one of the still forms, a young man with ash-blonde hair. He took a blast to his chest. He hasn't moved since. My healer's instinct screamed. I was already moving, my medical satchel hurriedly provided by Valerius from the camp's supplies in my hand. I dropped to my knees beside the young man. His face was pale as wax, his lips tinged blue. I pressed my fingers to his throat, a pulse thready and faint. But there was no visible wound on his chest, only a strange, spiderweb pattern of blackened veins visible beneath the collar of his shirt. This is not a physical injury, I said, more to myself than anyone. I placed my hands lightly on his sternum, closing my eyes, reaching out with that inner sense. I recoiled instantly. A foreign, corrosive energy was coiled around his heart, a sickly, pulsing darkness slowly squeezing the life from him. It's a curse or a poison of the spirit, I said, looking up at Zephyr. His face was like carved stone in the torchlight. I've read of such things in my grandmother's oldest journals. It attacks the life force. Can you treat it? Valerius asked, her practical tone grounding the panic. I can try. My mind raced through the mental pharmacopoeia. I need clean water and wolfsbane. A startled murmur went through the guards. Wolfsbane was death to our kind. It is a poison, I explained quickly, my hands already rummaging in my bag for my mortar and pestle. But in minute doses, prepared by a healer who knows the old ways, it can shock a faltering system. It can sometimes burn out a spiritual corruption. It is a knife's edge. Zephyr didn't hesitate. Do it. His faith was absolute. I worked feverishly, grinding a single, tiny leaf of dried wolfsbane into powder, mixing it with water from my canteen. My hands were steady, the healer's calm descending upon me, narrowing the world to the patient, the pestle, the pulse under my fingers. The bond with Zephyr hummed in the background, a steadying force. I trickled the mixture between the young man's lips, massaging his throat to make him swallow. For a long, agonizing minute, nothing happened. Then he convulsed, his back arching off the ground. A gasp went up from the onlookers. Black smoke, smelling of charred meat and lightning, seeped from his mouth and nose. The web of black veins on his chest flared bright for a second, then faded, leaving only pale, unmarked skin. He took a huge, rattling breath, his eyes flying open, filled with terror and confusion before they rolled back, and he fell into a deep, natural sleep. His color was already improving. His father sobbed in relief, clutching his son's hand. I moved to the other wounded, my hands efficient, my mind clear. A deep laceration was stitched with steady fingers. A broken arm was set and splinted with sticks and strips of cloth. A witch ash poultice was applied to a wound that smelled of infection. All the while, Zephyr oversaw the securing of the area, his guards collecting evidence. A strange, black-feathered arrow, scraps of cloth that felt unnaturally cold, footprints that seemed melted into the earth. As I finished tying the last bandage, dawn was a thin gray line in the east. Exhaustion tugged at me, but it was a clean, satisfied weariness. I stood, wiping my hands on a clean cloth, and found Zephyr watching me. He stood apart from his men, his gaze fixed on me. In the pale dawn light, his expression was unreadable, but through the bond, I felt a tumultuous wave of emotion. Awe, fierce pride, a protectiveness so profound it felt like a physical wall being erected around me. He strode over, ignoring the others. You saved his life, he stated, his voice low. The wolfsbane did, I just guided it. Do not diminish what you did, he said, a note of command entering his voice. You saw what others did not, you knew a cure others would fear to use, you acted with certainty where even my battle-hardened guards hesitated. He looked from me to the recovering merchants, then back. This is what I saw in my vision, not just a gentle heart, a healer's heart, the strength to stand in the face of decay and command life to return. His words warmed me more than any fire. Before I could respond, Commander Valerius approached, holding the black-feathered arrow. Sire, this is not the work of any pack we know. The fletching, it's raven, but treated with something acidic, and the arrowhead is cold-forged iron. Forged to hurt us specifically. Zephyr took the arrow, his fingers careful, his face darkened. Raven feather, cold iron, spiritual poison. He looked east toward the mist-shrouded, barren mountains known as the Cursed Peaks. This bears the mark of the Corvus. A ripple of palpable dread went through the royal guards. Even Valerius stiffened. The Corvus, I asked, the name meaning nothing to me. A cult, Zephyr said, his voice grim, or what is left of one. They are not a pack. They are wolves who have turned their backs on the moon, who delve into forbidden, twisted magics. They believe our connection to the earth, to our beast, is a weakness. They seek to purify the wolf by severing it, using stolen magic and cold science. They have been a whisper, a ghost story for 50 years, but this, he held up the arrow, this is a declaration, and they attacked a pack under my protection on my very border. They took the silver, Valerius added. Silver is a conduit for many dark rituals. They are building toward something. Zephyr's eyes met mine, the silver-blue depths churning with storm clouds. The challenge from Frostfang was a petty squabble. This is a true threat to my rule, to the stability of every pack. The implications settled over the clearing, colder than the dawn mist. My newfound safety, the fragile beginning of my life with Zephyr, was already being shadowed by a danger far greater than courtly intrigue. We return to camp, Zephyr decreed, his kingly mask firmly back in place. We move the wounded merchants with us. We break camp by midday and make for the Blackwood Keep. The court must be assembled, the territories must be warned. As we prepared to leave, the merchant leader approached me, bowing deeply. "Lady Healer, Queen," he stammered, correcting himself after a glance at Zephyr, who gave a slight, confirming nod. "You have my son's life and my eternal loyalty. The Silvermane Pack will not forget this." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "See that he rests. Brew this tea for him twice daily for a week." I handed him a small pouch of herbs from my bag. The man clutched it like a holy relic. On the ride back, Zephyr rode closer to me. The bond between us was no longer just a personal connection. It thrummed with the shared weight of the new threat, with the unspoken understanding that our fates were now tied not just to each other, but to the safety of the entire realm. "The Corvus will have heard by now," he said quietly, for my ears only. "They will know I have a mate. They will see you as a target, not just to hurt me, but because what you are, a natural healer, deeply connected to the old, true magic of the wolf, is everything they hate and fear." I looked at the looming, dark line of the cursed peaks on the horizon, a nest of enemies who used poison and shadows. "Then let them see," I said, my voice quiet but steely. "Let them see that the king no longer stands alone in the winter, and that his queen knows how to cure their poisons." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a flash of fierce approval in his eyes. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time I was not walking it in the shadows. I was riding beside the king, the bond a silver thread in the growing light, the scent of wolfsbane and blood still on my hands, a reminder that my gentleness could be a weapon, and my new crown would be defended not just with power but with the unwavering will to heal. And the strength to fight for what was right. The real battle for our future had just begun, and it smelled of raven feathers and cold iron. The Blackwood Keep did not emerge from the landscape, it imposed itself upon it. We crested a final, brutal mountain pass, and there it was, a fortress of obsidian stone and glacial ice, carved into the very bones of the highest peak. Towers clawed at the steel-gray sky like frozen talons. Walls sheathed in perpetual frost glittered with a cruel, blue-white light. It was breathtaking, terrifying, and utterly devoid of warmth. It wasn't a home, it was a declaration of power carved in stone and ice. My mare shied beneath me, sensing my trepidation. The bond with Zephyr tightened, a soothing pulse of reassurance amidst the intimidating vista. "My home is your home," it seemed to whisper. But looking at that frigid citadel, I wondered if a healer who smelled of earth and lavender could ever belong in a place of eternal winter. The journey from the ambush site had been a swift, silent blur. The wounded merchants were taken to a nearby allied pack for full recovery. The mood in our company was tense, focused. The shadow of the Corvus hung over us, lending urgency to every mile. As we crossed the final bridge over a bottomless chasm and passed through the massive, rune-carved gates, the keep swallowed us whole. The air inside was still and cold, smelling of stone, ancient incense, and a subtle, pervasive ozone, the scent of Zephyr's unique power. Wolves in the black and silver livery of the royal guard stood at rigid attention, their eyes downcast as their king passed. Their gazes, however, flicked to me, curious, assessing, wary. We were met in the cavernous, vaulted entrance hall by a gaunt, severe-looking man with pale hair and eyes the color of a stagnant pond. He bowed with precise, economical grace. "Sire, welcome home. The court has been expectant." His voice was as dry as old parchment. "Chamberlain Fane," Zephyr acknowledged, his tone cool. "This is Lyra Reed. She is to be accorded every honor as my guest. The Sunstone Suite is to be prepared for her immediately. Commander Valerius will oversee her guard detail." Fane's pondwater eyes slid over me, taking in my travel-worn clothes, the simple leather satchel that held my herbs, the faint stains of blood and poultice on my sleeves. His expression did not change, but I felt the judgment like a physical chill. "The Sunstone Suite, sire. It has been reserved for—" "It is now reserved for Lyra," Zephyr interrupted, a finality in his voice that brooked no argument. "See it done." "Of course, sire." Fane bowed again, his movement stiff. "The Council of Peers has requested an audience at your earliest convenience. They are concerned about recent events. I will address them in the Hall of Whispers at sunset, ensure they are all present." Zephyr turned to me, and his demeanor softened, though the mask of the king was still firmly in place. "Lyra, Valerius will see you to your chambers. Rest. You will be summoned for the evening meal." He reached out, and for a moment I thought he might take my hand, but he stopped, his fingers curling back. A public touch here in his court of eyes was a statement he was not yet ready to make. "You are safe here." He turned and strode away, his boots echoing on the polished stone, Chamberlain Fane gliding silently in his wake like a ghost. Commander Valerius appeared at my side. "This way, my lady." she led me through a maze of soaring corridors and sweeping staircases. The keep was a masterpiece of cold beauty, tapestries depicting epic battles and star maps, statues of stern-faced ancestors, windows of thick violet-tinged ice that distorted the mountain views. There was no color, no softness. It was a monument to endurance, not comfort. The Sunstone Suite, when we reached it, was a paradox. The sitting room was vast, with a wall of windows overlooking the dizzying peaks. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to stand in, fighting valiantly against the pervasive chill. The furnishings were rich but austere, dark wood, gray silks, white furs, but in the center of a heavy oak table sat a single, stunning incongruity, a vase overflowing with living, blooming sunflowers. Their bold, yellow faces were a shout of color and life in the monochrome room. Valeria saw my gaze. "The king's orders," she said, a hint of something like approval in her voice. "He had them brought from the lower greenhouses, he said you would need to see something growing." The gesture, so thoughtful, so utterly at odds with the stern king, brought a lump to my throat. It was a tiny piece of warmth in the gilded cage. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Silent, efficient servants brought a copper bath and steaming water. They laid out garments, not the simple wool I was used to, but gowns of velvet and silk in deep emerald, sapphire, and a startling moonlit silver. They felt alien against my skin. As I dressed with the help of a quiet young maid named Alara, I heard the first whispers from beyond the door. Courtiers, their voices hushed but carrying in the stone hallways. "Found her in some backwater pack," I heard a healer. "Frostfang is in an uproar, the beta's son humiliated. What can she offer the king? She has no lineage, no allies. Perhaps it's a political maneuver, a slight against the eastern packs, or perhaps she's a witch who's bespelled him." The words were daggers, each one honed by courtly malice. I straightened my spine, the silver gown feeling like armor. Let them whisper, I thought. They know nothing of the bond, of the vision, of the wolfsbane in the gully. At sunset, Alara guided me to the Hall of Whispers. The name was apt. It was a long, narrow chamber with a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. Sound carried strangely here, so that conversations from one end could be faintly heard at the other, a suzerainess of secrets. At the far end on a dais sat 2 thrones carved from glacial ice and obsidian. Zephyr occupied one, dressed in formal black, a simple silver circlet on his brow. He looked every inch the untouchable Winter King. The other throne stood empty. The hall was filled with perhaps 50 wolves, the council of peers. I saw Councillor Arden, his thin lips pressed in a disapproving line. Lady Moira stood with a cluster of elegantly dressed she-wolves, her smile sharp as a razor. There were warriors in polished armor, elders in rich robes, emissaries from major packs with calculating eyes, and all those eyes turned to me as I entered. The whispering stopped, the silence was heavy, hostile. I walked the length of the hall alone, the tap of my shoes the only sound. I felt like a doe walking into a den of winter wolves, but I kept my head high, my gaze fixed on Zephyr. His silver-blue eyes met mine, and through the bond I felt a surge of steadying strength. "You belong here," it seemed to say, beside me. I reached the dais and gave a graceful, respectful curtsy, not to the court but to my king, to my mate. "Lyra Reed," Zephyr said, his voice filling the hall effortlessly. "Be welcome in the Hall of Whispers." "Thank you, my king," I replied, my voice clear and carrying in the perfect acoustics. He gestured to the empty throne beside him. A collective, sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. To sit on the dais was an honor. To be offered the queen's throne, it was a statement that shook the foundations of the court. For a heartbeat, I hesitated. This would light a fire under the whispers, turn them into shouts. But to refuse would be a rejection of him, of our bond, of the destiny we were stepping into. I met Zephyr's gaze, saw the unwavering certainty there, and made my choice. I ascended the 2 steps and sat upon the ice and obsidian throne. It was cold, unforgiving, but as I settled, the bond hummed in contentment. A perfect fit. The court was in stunned, silent uproar. Councillor Arden was the first to find his voice. "Sire, with all respect, the presentation of a guest on the royal dais is highly irregular. The empty throne has been a symbol of—" "It is empty no longer," Zephyr cut him off, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Lyra Reed is not merely a guest, she is under my eternal protection and my personal favor. Her word in this court carries my authority. Is that understood?" It was a bombshell delivered with icy calm. Murmurs of shock and protest rippled through the assembly. Lady Moira's eyes glittered with furious calculation. Before anyone else could protest, Zephyr continued, "We have more pressing matters. The Silvermane merchant train was ambushed 2 nights past by the Corvus." The name sent a visible shudder through the council. The personal drama was instantly overshadowed by the older, deeper fear. Evidence confirms it, Zephyr said, holding up the black-feathered arrow Valerius had retrieved. Cold iron, spiritual poison. They are active, they are bold, and they are building towards something on our eastern border. I want every patrol doubled. I want scouts in the cursed peaks. I want every pack leader informed and ready. The council erupted into concerned debate, logistics, troop movements, ancient histories of the Corvus. I sat silently, listening, absorbing. I watched the players, Arden, who seemed more upset about protocol than the threat, Moira, who watched Zephyr with a possessive hunger that turned my blood cold, a grizzled old general named Corbin who spoke of tactics with sharp intelligence. As the debate wore on, a servant approached the dais, bowing low. He carried a small, ornate wooden box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "For the lady," he whispered, offering it to me. I took it, confused. It was not heavy. I glanced at Zephyr, but he was deep in conversation with General Corbin, perhaps a welcome gift from some courtier seeking favor. I lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, lay a single dead raven. Its neck was broken, its beady eyes staring into nothing. Clutched in its beak was a scrap of parchment. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. The message was short, written in a spidery, rust-colored ink that smelled faintly of blood and bitter herbs. "The Winter King crowns a weed. We will pluck it, root and stem, and watch his frozen heart wither. The Corvus sees all." My blood turned to ice. The box slipped from my fingers, clattering on the stone dais. The dead raven tumbled out, a blot of darkness against the pale floor. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to me, then to the grotesque offering. Zephyr was at my side in an instant, his hand on my arm. He saw the raven, saw the note in my hand. His face, already cold, became a mask of murderous fury. The temperature in the Hall of Whispers dropped so sharply that frost crackled across the windows. He took the note, read it, and his silence was more terrifying than any roar. He looked out at his stunned, frightened court. "It seems," he said, his voice a soft, deadly whisper that carried to every corner, "the Corvus has delivered their response to my claim. They have threatened the crown, they have threatened my mate." He crushed the note in his fist. The bond between us thrummed with a rage so potent it was like standing next to a volcano. "The game has changed," Zephyr declared, his glacial gaze sweeping over every face. "This is no longer a border skirmish. This is war, and let this be my answer to those carrion birds in the mountains." He lifted his clenched fist, and the crushed note burst into cold, silver flames, burning away to nothing without a trace of ash. "The weed they threaten," he said, his voice rising to a clarion call, "is under the protection of the deepest winter. Let them come and try to pluck her. They will find only frostbite and death." He turned to me, the fury in his eyes softening into unwavering resolve. The message was clear. The cage might be gilded, but the enemy was at the gate, and I was no longer just a healer or a pawn or a queen in waiting. I was the spark that had just ignited a war. The days that followed the Raven's message were a blur of grim preparation and thinly veiled hostility. The Blackwood Keep became a fortress anticipating siege. Patrols departed at all hours. The forge beneath the keep hammered day and night, turning out cold iron-tipped arrows and rune-etched blades. The air crackled with a tension far colder than the mountain wind. And I, Lyra Reed, former healer of Frostfang, was at the center of the storm. My presence was no longer just a court scandal, it was a strategic liability, a weakness the enemy had named. The whispers didn't stop, they curdled into open suspicion. I felt the court's eyes on me in the corridors, not just assessing but accusing. She brought this upon us. The king was secure until she arrived. The Corvus moved because of her. Zephyr was a bastion of icy resolve. He spent hours in the war room with General Corbin and Valerius planning the defense of the territories. But he was also determined to root out the traitor within our walls. The dead raven had not flown into the Sunstone Suite on its own. Someone in the keep, a servant, a guard, a courtier, had delivered that threat. The knowledge was a poison in the water of the court, turning ally against ally. I refused to be a prisoner in my gilded rooms. The bond with Zephyr was a source of strength, a constant, silent conversation. I felt his frustration at the court's pettiness, his burning anger at the threat to me, his relentless focus on the larger danger. In return, I tried to send back calm determination. "I am not fragile, use me." One afternoon, seeking escape from the stifling atmosphere, I asked Alara to take me to the keep's infirmary. If I could not fight, I could heal. The infirmary was in the lower levels, a series of cavernous, drafty halls lined with cots. It was clean but bleak, smelling of antiseptic and old pain. The head healer, an elderly wolf named Silas with hands knotted by arthritis and eyes that had seen too much blood, looked up from a patient as I entered. His expression was not welcoming. "My lady," he said, his tone carefully neutral, "this is no place for you. The wounded can be distressing." "I am a healer, Master Silas," I said, meeting his skeptical gaze. "Trained by Alara Reed of Frostfang, I wish to be of use." He snorted softly. "Frostfang techniques, folk remedies and poultices, we practice modern battlefield medicine here." He gestured to a tray of gleaming steel instruments, to jars of harsh-smelling chemical tinctures. I walked to the cot of the patient he was tending, a young guard with a feverish infection in a sword gash on his leg. The wound was red, swollen, weeping yellow pus. Silas was preparing to lance it. "May I?" I asked softly. He shrugged, stepping back with a look that said, "Indulge the king's pet." I ignored him. I placed my hands near the wound, not touching it, and closed my eyes. I reached out with my senses past the heat and inflammation, feeling the discordant, sick energy of the infection, the body's struggle against it. It was a familiar song, a wrong note in the system's harmony. I opened my bag and took out a small clay jar. Inside was a salve I had made from the keep stores, a blend of honey, crushed garlic, and a particular gray moss that grew on the north side of the mountain stones, rich in natural antibacterials. Silas watched, his bushy eyebrows raised, as I gently cleaned the wound with clean water and a soft cloth, then applied the salve with careful fingers. I whispered an old healing chant my grandmother had taught me, not magic, but a focusing of intention, a call to the body's own wisdom. "Superstition," Silas muttered, but he didn't stop me. I bandaged the wound with clean linen. "Change the dressing with this salve twice daily. Make him tea of willow bark and elderflower for the fever," I instructed the attending orderly. The young guard, his eyes glassy with pain, managed a weak nod of thanks. For the next few hours, I moved from cot to cot. A broken bone set poorly was reset with a gentler touch. A case of deep melancholy and a soldier haunted by nightmares was soothed with a tea of chamomile and a listening ear. I used my hands, my herbs, my quiet presence. I did not try to replace Silas's methods, I complemented them. Where his steel was sharp, my touch was soft. Both had their place. By the time I left, the atmosphere in the infirmary had shifted. The orderlies looked at me with less suspicion, more curiosity. Silas did not thank me, but as I was leaving, he gruffly said, "That moss, the gray one, where did you learn its use?" "The old healers of the Whispering Glen," I said. "They believe the mountain provides the cure next to the poison." He gave a slow, thoughtful nod, his eyes holding a grudging respect. "HMPH, perhaps not all Frostfang ways are backward." It was a small victory, but it felt like planting a seed in frozen ground. My next challenge was the court itself. At Zephyr's insistence, I began attending the daily briefings in the Hall of Whispers. I sat on the dais, a silent observer, while reports came in. Patrols spotted Corvus scouts moving like shadows through the foothills. A remote outpost had been found mysteriously deserted, its sigils defaced. The tension was a wire pulled taut. During one such briefing, Lady Moira stood, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "My king, our resources are stretched thin guarding the passes and investigating this internal matter." Her eyes slid to me. "Perhaps it would be prudent to send our precious guest to a more secure location. The summer palace in the southern valleys, perhaps, far from the threat and from the distractions of the court." It was a velvet-gloved suggestion to remove me, to sideline the problem. Before Zephyr could respond, I spoke. My voice, though quiet, carried in the hushed hall. "The Corvus message was not just a threat, Lady Moira, it was intelligence." All eyes turned to me, surprised I had spoken at all. "They called me a weed," I continued, choosing my words with care. "They believe I am a weakness to be removed. If I am sent away, hidden, it proves their point. It shows them their tactic works, that they can manipulate the king's strategy by targeting me. It makes me a lever they can pull." I looked at Zephyr, then back at the council. "I am safest here at the heart of the king's power, and my presence is a statement. The crown does not yield to threats, it roots deeper." A murmur ran through the hall. General Corbin stroked his beard, a glint of approval in his shrewd eyes. Even Councillor Arden looked thoughtful. Zephyr's gaze on me was blazing with pride. "Well reasoned," he said, his voice final. "Lyra remains, the discussion is closed." Lady Moira's smile tightened, but she dipped her head in submission, her eyes promising future schemes. That evening, Zephyr came to the Sunstone suite. He dismissed Alara and stood by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on his stark features. The bond hummed with a tired satisfaction. "You impressed Corbin today," he said without preamble, "and you silenced Moira for now, not with power but with logic, with a different kind of strength." "I only spoke the truth I saw," I said, joining him by the fire. "That is what makes it powerful." He was silent for a moment, watching the flames. "The investigation into the Raven's delivery, it leads nowhere. A servant found the box outside the hall door. No one saw who left it. The traitor is clever and patient." The frustration in his voice was palpable. "It feels like trying to catch smoke." "Then perhaps we should stop chasing the smoke," I said slowly, an idea forming, "and look for the fire." He turned to me, intrigued. "The Corvus want me removed because I am a symbol of your change, of your connection to the old, natural ways they hate, but they also need information. They knew about the merchant train. They got a message into the heart of your keep. They have eyes and ears somewhere." I met his gaze. "What if we gave them something to see, something that looks like a weakness but is really a trap?" His eyes narrowed, the strategist in him instantly engaged. "A play within a play, you wish to be the bait." "I wish to be the root," I corrected. "The thing that looks fragile on the surface but is anchored deep, waiting to ensnare what comes to pluck it." A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, the first true smile I had seen in days. It was a winter wolf smile. "Tell me your plan, Lyra." And so, in the warmth of the fire, with the enemy at the gates and a traitor in the walls, we began to weave our own web, not of cold iron and poison, but of perception and patience. The court saw a gentle healer out of her depth. The Corvus saw a vulnerable weed. But beneath the frost, the roots were spreading, strong and silent and ready. The war would be fought on the battlefield, but the first true victory would be won here, in the shadows of the keep, with a truth only the two of us shared. The Winter King and his queen were not just defending. They were learning to hunt. Our plan was delicate, a spider's web spun of whispers and staged frustrations. It began with a calculated argument, performed not in the privacy of the Sunstone suite, but in the main corridor outside the Hall of Whispers, where the acoustics guaranteed an audience. "You cannot keep me caged here like a songbird, Zephyr." My voice, raised in uncharacteristic sharpness, echoed off the stone. A few courtiers passing by slowed, ears twitching. "I am not a porcelain doll to be placed on a shelf. The infirmary needs help, the lower villages need medicine, and I sit here embroidering." Zephyr, playing his part with icy perfection, stood rigid, his expression a mask of royal displeasure. "Your safety is paramount, Lyra. The Corvus threat is real. You will remain within the keep's inner ward, that is final." "Safety, or is it control?" I fired back, a tremor in my voice that was only half feigned. The helplessness, the frustration of the past weeks fueled the performance. "You plucked me from one prison to place me in another, grander one. I need the sun. I need the earth under my feet, not just this beautiful ice." I turned on my heel, the picture of furious, impotent distress, and fled down the corridor, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. The courtiers exchanged wide-eyed glances. The king's gentle guest had a spine after all, and she was chafing against her gilded chains. The whispers began immediately. "She's ungrateful, she doesn't understand the danger, the king's favor is waning, perhaps he regrets his impulsive claim." We fed the narrative carefully. I made a show of requesting and being denied permission to visit the keep's extensive herb gardens, which lay just outside the inner defensive wall. I was seen sitting listlessly by windows, staring longingly at the mountains. Commander Valerius, in on the scheme, was overheard confiding in a trusted lieutenant about the strain the situation was putting on the king's focus. The goal was to paint a picture: a divided court, a king distracted by a troublesome, discontented mate, a vulnerability in the fortress's unity, and a specific opportunity, a she-wolf desperate for a taste of freedom, who might be persuaded to take a foolish risk. The trap was set not with steel but with discontent. Meanwhile, in the deepest sanctum of the keep, a secluded chamber behind the royal library known only to the king and his commander, the real work was done. Here, under the light of cold blue witchfire orbs, Zephyr, Valerius, General Corbin, and I pored over maps and reports. "The Corvus movements are concentrating here," Corbin said, his gnarled finger stabbing a map at a narrow pass called the Shivering Gap. "They're using the old mining tunnels, but their scouts are also watching the keep closely. They'll have seen our little performance." Zephyr's eyes were chips of frozen sky. "Then we offer them the opportunity they're waiting for, a public outing, well guarded but with a predictable route and a moment of perceived vulnerability." The Royal Grove, Valerius suggested. It's a half-day's ride within the secured territory but wooded enough for an ambush. We announce a visit for Lyra to lift her spirits, to gather specific healing plants that supposedly only grow there. It's plausible and it gets her outside the walls. And the vulnerability? I asked, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. The sunstone glade in the center of the grove, Zephyr said. It's a small clearing where the royal party traditionally stops to rest. The tree cover is thick around it, perfect for an ambush. We'll have our best trackers hidden in the trees, our guards appearing lax, distracted. You will wander slightly apart from the main group to examine a particular bush. That will be the moment. The plan was clear. I would be the glittering lure. The Corvus, believing they were exploiting a rift and seizing a prime target, would strike, and our hidden forces would close around them. We wouldn't just drive them off, we would take prisoners. We would get answers. The night before the planned outing, I couldn't sleep. The bond hummed with a mixture of Zephyr's focused intensity and a low, protective anxiety he could not fully suppress. I rose and went to the window, looking out at the moonlit peaks. Was I brave or just foolish? I was a healer, not a warrior. My weapons were herbs and kindness, not strategy and deceit. A soft knock came at my chamber door. It was Zephyr. He wore no crown, just simple dark clothes, his hair tousled. He looked younger and weary. "You should rest," he said, his voice soft. "So should you." He came to stand beside me at the window. "The plan is sound. Valerius and Corbin have arranged everything. You will be protected every second." I know. I wrapped my arms around myself. It's not the fear of the attack, it's the acting, the pretending to be something I'm not, a spoiled, fragile thing. He turned to me, his silver blue eyes serious in the moonlight. "You are not pretending to be fragile, Lyra. You are using your true feelings, your frustration, your need for purpose, and directing them. That is not deceit, that is tactics. The strongest blade is one that bends before it strikes." He hesitated, then reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from my cheek. The contact sent the familiar silver current through me, calming and energizing. "Tomorrow you will not be bait. You will be the root in the frost, just as you said, the anchor of our trap, and I will be the storm that breaks upon anyone who touches you." His faith was an unshakable pillar. I leaned into his touch for a moment, drawing strength from the cold fire of the bond. "Together," I whispered. "Always," he vowed. The morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. The royal procession was a small but visible one, Zephyr and I on horseback, Valerius and a hand-picked squad of 10 guards, along with 2 servants with baskets for the healing herbs. We rode out through the main gates to the curious stairs of the court. Lady Moira watched from a high balcony, her expression unreadable. The ride to the Royal Grove was quiet, the landscape a breathtaking expanse of snow-dusted pines and jagged gray rock. The beauty was a stark contrast to the tension coiling in my stomach. I played my part, pointing at trees, asking questions about the flora, forcing a brightness into my voice. Zephyr played his, responding with brief, polite answers, the picture of a king indulging a whim. We reached the sunstone glade by mid-morning. True to its name, the clearing was bathed in pale, wintry sunlight dotted with smooth white stones. As planned, the guards took up relaxed positions at the edge of the trees. The servants began unpacking a small meal. Zephyr dismounted and spoke quietly with Valerius, his back partly turned. This was the moment. I wandered away from the group, towards a cluster of winterberry bushes at the far side of the glade, near the thickest tree line. My senses were stretched taut. Every rustle of a squirrel, every sigh of the wind felt amplified. My fingers, pretending to examine the red berries, trembled slightly. "Come on," I thought, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. "Take the bait." For a long, agonizing minute, nothing happened. Had they seen through it? Were they not watching? Then the world erupted. There was no war cry, just a sudden, silent onslaught. Figures clad in mottled gray and black, their faces obscured by masks of bleached leather, melted from the trees. They moved with that same unnatural, liquid silence I remembered from the merchant attack. 8 of them. They ignored the guards, ignored Zephyr. Their cold, dead fish eyes were fixed solely on me. Time seemed to slow. I saw a crossbow aimed, a black-feathered bolt knocked. I saw another figure raise a hand, crackling with that sickly, ozone-tinged energy. I stood my ground as instructed. The root does not flee. Just before the bolt was loosed, a silver blur shot from the trees to my left. Zephyr. He moved faster than thought, placing himself between me and the attackers. He didn't block the bolt with a shield. He caught it out of the air, his hand closing around the shaft, the cold iron tip inches from his palm. He snapped it like a twig. At the same moment, our hidden forces struck. Royal guards, led by Valerius and Corbin, surged from concealed positions all around the glade. It wasn't an ambush, it was a perfectly executed pincer movement. The Corvus agents, so focused on their target, were caught completely off guard. Chaos ensued, a brutal, silent dance of clashing steel, snarls, and the sizzle of dark magic meeting the pure, cold fury of Zephyr's power. He was a whirlwind, disarming, disabling, his every move precise and devastating. He was protecting me, but he was also sending a message. This was the strength that guarded the weed. I didn't cower, I watched, my healer's eye cataloging. I saw one of our guards take a glancing blow from a crackling energy whip, his arm going numb. I saw a Corvus agent try to melt back into the shadows, only to be tackled by Corbin himself. The fight was over in minutes. 6 Corvus agents lay dead or subdued. 2 had managed to flee, vanishing into the forest like smoke, but we had prisoners, 3 of them disarmed and bound with silver-chained manacles that glowed with suppressing runes. Zephyr stood in the center of the glade, barely winded, a fierce, cold satisfaction in his eyes. He looked at me and I gave a small, steady nod. I am unharmed. He strode to the nearest prisoner, yanking off the leather mask. The face beneath was gaunt, the eyes sunken and gleaming with fanatical hatred. The wolf's natural amber glow was gone, replaced by a flat, dead gray. "You have 2 choices," Zephyr said, his voice the temperature of absolute zero. "You can tell me what the Corvus is planning at the Shivering Gap, or you can experience the full extent of Winter's patience." The prisoner spat at Zephyr's feet. The saliva froze before it hit the ground. Zephyr didn't flinch, he simply looked at Valerius. "Take them to the black cells, use every method, I want answers by nightfall." As the prisoners were dragged away, Zephyr came to me. The battle fury faded from his eyes, replaced by a deep, searching concern. He took my hands in his, they were cold, but his touch was gentle. "You were magnificent," he murmured, for my ears alone. "I just stood there," I whispered back, the adrenaline beginning to ebb, leaving me shaky. "You held the line," he corrected. "You were the unwavering center, that is the hardest part." He squeezed my hands, the bond between us singing with relief and triumph. "The trap worked, now we peel back the shadows. The war begins in earnest today, Lyra, not on a battlefield but in a dungeon. And we have just won our first true victory." I looked at the captured agents, at the determination on the faces of Valerius and Corbin, and finally at the Winter King whose hand held mine. The fragile bait had held, the hidden blade had struck. And for the first time, I felt not like a healer in a world of warriors, but like a queen who had helped orchestrate a battle. The roots in the frost had held firm, and from them, we would now grow a strategy to end the Corvus threat for good. The victory in the Sunstone Glade was a cold, hard stone thrown into the still pond of the court. The ripples were immediate and contradictory. For some, like General Corbin and the guards who had fought, my calm presence during the ambush transformed me from a fragile burden to a figure of quiet fortitude. The whispers in the mess hall now spoke of the Queen's nerve and the King's cunning trap. For others, like Counselor Arden and Lady Moira's circle, it was a disaster. Their narrative of a distracting, troublesome weakness had shattered. The fact that I had been central to a successful military operation made me more dangerous, not less. Their hostility didn't fade, it refined, turning from disdain into something sharper, more calculating. And then there were the prisoners in the black cells. The black cells were not part of the main keep. They were hewn into the mountain itself, deep below the foundations, where the cold was a living thing and the silence was absolute. It was a place designed to break the will of anything that lived. I stood with Zephyr in an observation chamber behind a wall of one-way violet ice, watching as Valerius and a specialist interrogator named Rook worked on the lead captive, the one who had spat at Zephyr's feet. His name, we had learned, was Vorgin. Rook was a small, unassuming wolf with kind eyes and a soft voice. He used no hot irons, no brands. His tools were a basin of water, a set of silver needles, and an endless, patient calm. He spoke of mundane things, the taste of summer berries, the feel of sun on fur, while he applied the needles to specific points on Vorgin's shackled body. The needles were tipped with a distilled extract of truth serum flowers and something else, a psychic dampener Valerius had procured. "We learned from the last Corvus War," Zephyr murmured beside me, his eyes fixed on the scene. "Torture only feeds their fanaticism, they see pain as purification. But to strip away their connection to their corrupt magic, to flood them with memories of the sensations they have forsaken, that creates a dissonance their twisted faith cannot withstand. It was brutal in its own way. Vorjin trembled not from cold or pain but from a profound, soul-deep confusion. Rook's gentle voice was a relentless tide, washing away the grim certainty the Corvus indoctrination had built. "They are building an amplifier," Vorjin finally gasped, his voice ragged, his eyes losing their dead-gray sheen and swimming with unwanted, vivid memory. "At the heart of the peaks in the old geomancer's observatory, they use the stolen silver to channel the ley lines to cast a great severing." "A severing," Rook prompted, his voice still soft. "A ritual to cut all wolves in the territories from the moon's pull from their beasts to make us all empty, clean." Vorjin shuddered, a tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. It was a tear of anguish, not for his cause but for the remembered scent of pine he had just been forced to recall. The eclipse, they wait for the lunar eclipse in 7 days, when the moon's connection is weakest. Zephyr's hand clenched into a fist on the ice window, leaving a brief fogged imprint. A severing ritual. They don't just want to conquer, they want to unmake us, to strip the wolf from every soul in the territories. The scale of the ambition was monstrous. It wasn't genocide, it was spiritual obliteration. "The amplifier is powered by a core," Vorjin mumbled, his will crumbling under the onslaught of sensory memory. "A living heart of a powerful, natural wolf, one deeply tied to the old ways. The purer the connection, the stronger the severing." His sunken eyes, now glistening with unwanted clarity, drifted across the chamber. Not to Rook, not to Valerius. Through the one-way ice they seemed to land directly on me. A cold deeper than any dungeon seized my spine. "They have a target for the core," Zephyr said, his voice a deadly whisper. It wasn't a question. Vorjin gave a weak, miserable nod. "The king's new mate, the healer, she smells of the deep earth and untouched magic. She is the key, the perfect heart for the machine." The observation chamber seemed to spin. The ambush hadn't just been an attempt to kill or kidnap me. I was to be a component, a battery for a ritual to destroy everything our world was. Zephyr turned from the window. His face was pale, his eyes blazing with a fury so intense the air around him shimmered with cold. Without a word, he took my arm and guided me from the chamber, up through the winding stone passages, back to the relative warmth of the upper keep. He didn't speak until we were in the privacy of his personal study, a room of books and maps, the only warmth coming from a single, large hearth. He paced before the fire, a caged glacier. "This changes everything. They don't just want you dead, they need you alive, captured. They will throw everything they have at the keep now, not to breach it but to snatch you from it." I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. A living heart, how is such a thing even possible? Forbidden geomantic texts, blood magic of the worst kind. The Corvus founders were scholars who fell into darkness, believing emotion and instinct were diseases to be cured. He stopped pacing, pinning me with his gaze. "You cannot leave my side, not for a moment. The Sunstone Suite is no longer secure enough. You will move to the royal chambers, tonight." It wasn't a suggestion, it was the strategic command of a general layered over the desperate fear of a mate. The bond thrummed with his protective terror. "I understand," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "But, Zephyr, if I am this perfect heart, it's because of what I am, a healer tied to the natural magic. Can we use that, not just as weakness, but as a weapon? If their machine needs my kind of connection, could I disrupt it from within?" He stared at me, the strategist warring with the protector. "It is a thought of terrifying risk, to even consider putting you near that device. Is no more risky than waiting for them to inevitably try to tear me from your side." I stood, meeting his turmoil with my own rising resolve. "You said I was the root. Roots don't just anchor, they can crack foundations, they can poison the soil they are planted in. What if I am not just the bait or the prize, but the toxin?" A long, heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The idea hung between us, dangerous and glittering. "It would require getting you to the heart of the peaks," he said slowly. "Into the heart of their power. It would be the greatest risk either of us has ever taken. Or the only way to end this without a war that bleeds the territories dry," I countered. "They are waiting for the eclipse. We have 7 days, we know their location, we know their goal, we have something they don't expect." "What's that?" "The heart they want wants to stop them." A grim, approving light dawned in his eyes. The fear was still there, a dark undercurrent in the bond, but it was being overridden by the ruthless calculus of a king facing an existential threat. We would need a plan within a plan, an attack force to engage their defenses. "And a small, stealth team to get you to the amplifier itself." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "Valerius, Corbin, we must speak with them immediately." Just then a hesitant knock sounded at the door. Chamberlain Fane entered, his face even more pinched than usual. "Sire, a situation in the lower kitchens." Zephyr's patience, already frayed, was thin. "What now, Fane?" "It's the new scullery maid, sire, the one from the Timberfall pack. She was found whispering to a raven on the outer parapet. When confronted, she collapsed. She is saying things, strange things, about shadows in the wine cellar, about a sickness in the stone." I exchanged a glance with Zephyr. A sickness in the stone. After what we had just learned, every strange occurrence felt like a thread in the Corvus web. "Where is she?" I asked. "In the infirmary, my lady, but she is not well." Silas is baffled. "Healer's intuition," Zephyr said to me, a decision in his eyes. "Go, see what your senses can uncover. Valerius will accompany you. I will summon Corbin here. We begin planning the counterstroke tonight." The infirmary was quiet. The maid, a young girl named Brenna, lay on a cot, shivering violently despite being wrapped in furs. Her eyes were wide open, but they didn't see the room. They saw something else. Her lips moved in a continuous, silent stream. Master Silas stood by, frustrated. No fever, no injury, she just babbles about darkness with teeth, about a song under the mountain that's out of tune. I approached slowly, my healer's senses reaching out. I felt no physical illness, but there was a wrongness. A psychic residue, thin and foul like the smell left after the black smoke from the cursed guard. It was fainter but similar. I placed my hands gently on her temples. "Brenna," I said softly, "can you hear me?" Her eyes snapped to mine, focusing with terrifying intensity. "The stones are singing the wrong song," she hissed, her voice too loud. "They put the notes in the dark places, in the wine, in the water, in the breath of the vents. It's a slow poison for the mind. To make you sleepy, to make you not see the shadows when they come for the heart." Her words were the ravings of delirium, or they were a terrified, fragmented warning. "A psychic poison," I breathed, looking at Silas and Valerius, "administered through the supplies, not to kill, to dull, to create confusion and lethargy right before an attack. I thought of the Corvus needing to snatch me from a fortified keep. They're not just planning an assault. They're planning to walk in through a door they've already left unlocked. They're drugging the entire keep." Valerius's face went pale with fury. "The water source, the ventilation shafts, we must shut everything down, purge the stores." As she barked orders to nearby guards, I held Brenna's hand, sending a pulse of calm, clean energy through our touch, trying to push back the psychic filth. Her shivering slowed. "The song, it's quieter when you're here," she mumbled, her eyes drifting shut. "You smell like before the rot." I stayed with her until she fell into a natural sleep, the corrupt energy soothed if not fully cleansed. As I left the infirmary, the weight of the new threat was crushing, an amplifier to sever an entire species, a traitor poisoning the keep's very air. And I was the linchpin in both their plot and our desperate counterplan. The chessboard had just become a knife's edge, and we had 7 days to checkmate an enemy that wanted to break the board entirely. The cracks in the ice were spreading, and in them we could see the depth of the abyss below. The next 48 hours were a frantic, silent purge. Under Valerius's iron command, the keep became a giant, meticulous patient. The main water cisterns were drained and scrubbed with salt and crushed moon mint. The intricate network of ventilation shafts, designed to bring fresh mountain air deep into the stone, were scoured by teams wearing filtered masks. Every sack of grain, every barrel of wine, every root vegetable in the storerooms was inspected by a team led by a grim-faced Master Silas and myself. We found the wrong notes in the song. Tiny clay ampules, no larger than a thumbnail, hidden in flour sacks, lodged in the supports of wine racks, placed where the steady drip of a condensation pipe would dissolve them over time. They contained a viscous, scentless black liquid that hummed with the same foul psychic resonance I'd felt in Brenna, a slow-release poison for the mind. The keep's population, guards, servants, courtiers were examined. Many showed early, subtle signs, unexplained fatigue, fleeting confusion, a dulling of the edges of their alertness. We dosed them with a strong tea of cleansing herbs, juniper, St. John's wort, and a precious few drops of pure moonlight distilled water. The atmosphere shifted from wary tension to a unified, grim determination. The enemy wasn't just at the gate, they had been inside the walls, touching their food, their air. It forged a brittle, furious solidarity. In the war room, now operating under the strictest secrecy, our counterplan took shape. It was audacious, a gamble that made my blood run cold even as I recognized its brutal necessity. Operation Frostfall. Phase 1, a decoy. General Corbin would lead the bulk of the Blackwood forces in a very public, very aggressive assault on the Shivering Gap. The goal was not to take the pass, but to make a deafening noise, to draw every Corvus warrior and eye to the front lines, convincing them the king was leading a full-scale military response. Phase 2, the dagger. While the gap erupted in battle, a small, elite team would infiltrate the heart of the peaks from a forgotten, treacherous route, a path known only to ancient hunters and Zephyr himself. The team, Zephyr, Valerius, two of her most stealthy trackers, and me. Phase 3, the heart. Our team would reach the Geomancer's observatory. There, while Zephyr and Valerius dealt with the guards and the ritual's masters, my role would begin. Using my connection to the natural magic they sought to pervert, I would attempt not to power their amplifier but to sabotage it, to turn their perfect heart into a fatal arrhythmia. It is the only way, Zephyr said, his finger tracing the route on a yellowed, ancient map. A direct assault on the observatory would be suicide. They will expect it, they will have their strongest forces there, but they will not expect you to come to them. And they will not expect you to bring the knowledge to break their machine. The risk to Lyra is extreme, Valerius stated, her arms crossed. She was not arguing, merely cataloging. If we are discovered before reaching the observatory or if the sabotage fails. Then we fight our way out or we die, Zephyr said, his voice flat. But if we do nothing, they will unleash the severing at the eclipse. They will rip the wolf from every innocent in the territories. They will turn our people into hollow, listless shells, and they will use Lyra's essence to do it. This is not a choice between risk and safety. It is a choice between a desperate chance and a guaranteed doom. The logic was a cold, hard blade. I felt its edge. I looked at the map, at the jagged line representing the shadow descent, a near-vertical climb up a sheer rock face in the dead of night. I thought of facing the amplifier, a device of silver and pain and stolen power. Fear was a living thing in my stomach. But I also thought of Brenna's haunted eyes, of the dead raven, of the merchant boy with the black veins around his heart. I thought of my grandmother's pendant, warm against my skin. Strength is a quiet growl. I can do it, I said, and my voice did not tremble. I must do it. The final council was held under a shroud of absolute secrecy. Only Zephyr, Valerius, Corbin, and I were present. The plans were committed to memory, then the maps were burned in the hearth. We would move in 3 days under the cover of a predicted snowstorm. The night before Corbin's decoy force was to depart, I sought solitude in the keep's small, secluded shrine to the moon. It was a simple, circular room with a skylight of clear ice. I wasn't praying for victory, I was seeking clarity. For the healer in me to make peace with the destroyer I might need to become. I didn't hear him enter, but I felt the shift in the air, the gentle pulse of the bond. Zephyr stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the torchlight of the hall. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I nodded. He came to stand beside me, looking up at the patch of starry sky through the ice. "I have fought countless battles," he said quietly. "Led charges, held lines, made decisions that sent good wolves to their deaths. It is the burden of the crown, but this, placing you in the path of the spear, this feels different. It feels like a failure of my most fundamental oath." I turned to him. In the faint light, the lines of worry on his face were deeply etched. "You are not placing me anywhere, Zephyr. I am choosing to walk this path. With you, the oath you speak of to protect, you are keeping it by fighting for all our people. By giving me the chance to fight with you, not just be sheltered by you." He reached out, his fingers brushing the pendant at my throat. "When I had the vision, I saw your gentleness, your light. I never imagined I would be the one to lead that light into the deepest darkness." "You're not leading me," I said, placing my hand over his. The familiar silver current flowed, calm and strong. "We are walking together. The moon didn't show you a fragile flower to put in a vase. She showed you a partner, for the long nights as well as the dawns." He pulled me into his arms then, not in passion, but in a fierce, desperate embrace. He held me as if I were the only solid thing in a crumbling world, his face buried in my hair. I felt the weight of his centuries, the loneliness, the crushing responsibility, and the new, terrifying fear of losing what he had only just found. I held him back, pouring every ounce of my certainty, my trust, into the bond between us. After a long moment, he pulled back, his hands cradling my face. His silver-blue eyes were luminous with unshed emotion. "When this is over," he vowed, his voice thick, "I will build you a garden that defies this winter. I will fill it with every flower that grows under the sun. You will never feel caged again." I smiled, a real smile that pushed back the fear. I don't need a garden, Zephyr. I just need to know that after tomorrow our people can still feel the moon's pull, that they can still hear their own hearts howl. That is garden enough. He rested his forehead against mine, and we stood in the silent shrine, two souls bound by winter and moonlight, steeling ourselves for the storm to come. The plans were made, the pieces were moving. The final, terrible gamble for the soul of the territories was about to begin. The next morning, General Corbin and 500 Blackwood warriors marched out of the keep with banners flying and horns blaring. The court watched from the walls. It looked like a king's glorious vengeance. Only a handful of us knew it was the loudest, most dangerous distraction ever conceived. As the echoes of their departure faded, our small team gathered in a hidden loading bay deep within the mountain. We wore dark, non-reflective gear, our faces smudged with ash. Our packs held climbing gear, weapons, and my healer's kit, now supplemented with vials of concentrated purification agents and the few precious moon-blessed crystals I had. Zephyr looked at each of us, Valerius, the two trackers, a brother and sister pair named Fen and Rain, and me. His gaze was the pale, focused blue of glacier ice. The storm hits in 2 hours. It will cover our ascent. We move fast, we move silent. Our lives and the fate of every wolf in the territories depend on it. No heroics, stick to the plan. His eyes found mine, and the bond pulsed with a last, fierce surge of protection and resolve. For the moon and for the pack. A low, unified growl answered him. We slipped out of the keep like ghosts, vanishing into the gathering gray of the afternoon, leaving the gilded cage behind to become the dagger aimed at the enemy's heart. The climb into the storm and into the unknown had begun. The storm did not hit, it descended. It was a living, breathing entity of howling wind and blinding, horizontal snow that scoured the mountain face like a million icy teeth. The world vanished into a roaring white void. It was perfect cover and a perfect nightmare. We moved in single file, tethered together by a strong, thin rope. Zephyr led, his preternatural sense of direction our only compass. Valerius took the rear. Fen and Rain flanked me in the middle, their keen eyes searching for handholds in the whiteout. The shadow descent was not a path. It was a near-vertical cliff face, a sheer wall of black rock now sheathed in treacherous, shifting ice. My world shrank to the next grip, the next foothold. My fingers, even in thick gloves, grew numb. The wind stole my breath, screaming in my ears with voices that sounded almost like words. The bond with Zephyr was a thin, silver thread in the chaos, a constant, quiet pull forward, a lifeline to his unwavering focus. I clung to it as fiercely as I clung to the rock. Hours blurred, my muscles screamed. My mind retreated into a numb, mechanical rhythm: reach, grip, pull, find footing, repeat. I was no longer Lyra, the healer, the queen. I was a creature of determination and cold. A sudden, sickening lurch. The rope behind me went taut, yanking hard against my harness. A choked cry was swallowed by the wind. I twisted, peering through the stinging snow. Rain, she had slipped. Her foot had punched through a shell of ice over a crevice. She dangled by her harness, one leg trapped, swinging dangerously over a drop that vanished into the white abyss below. Hold! Valerius's command was a whip crack even through the storm. Fen, ahead of me, had already braced, his body flattened against the rock face. Zephyr above us all was a still, dark shape. "I'm coming down," he shouted. No, Rain's voice was strained but sharp. "The delay, the ice around my boot is shifting. If you put more weight on this section, the whole ledge could go. You have to cut me loose." The words were a bolt of ice to my heart. Cut her loose, to fall into that nothingness. "Negative," Valerius barked. "Commander, it's the mission," Rain insisted, her voice cracking with pain and resolve. "The king and the lady must reach the observatory. My life is not worth the territories. Cut the rope." A terrible silence, filled only by the shriek of the storm. The choice was an abomination: to sacrifice one of our own to continue. My healer's mind, trained to save life at all costs, rebelled, but the queen, the partner in this desperate gamble, understood the brutal arithmetic. Rain was right, every second counted, the amplifier, the eclipse, millions of souls. Zephyr's anguish poured through the bond, a wave of frozen fire. He was the king, the decision was his, to order a loyal soldier's death. Before he could speak, I acted. "Wait," I screamed into the wind, "don't cut it." I began to climb down, moving past Fen with careful, deliberate speed. "Lyra, no," Zephyr's voice was raw with terror. "I'm lighter than you," I called back, not stopping, "and I can see what's wrong." I reached Rain's level. The ledge she was on was indeed fracturing, a spiderweb of cracks spreading from where her foot was lodged. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. "My lady, go back." Ignoring her, I anchored myself as best I could and leaned out, peering at her trapped boot. It wasn't just ice. A sharp spur of black rock had her pinned, the ice merely holding it in place. It wasn't a matter of pulling her free, it was a matter of breaking the rock or her ankle. I fumbled in my pack with stiff fingers, pulling out not a tool but a small vial from my healer's kit. Frost crack salve, used to rapidly expand and contract ice to shatter it in mining. It was highly volatile. "Rain, listen to me. When I say you need to pull your foot straight up with everything you have, don't twist." "What are you going to do?" she yelled. "I'm going to convince the mountain to let you go." I uncorked the vial and, praying to the moon for aim in the screaming wind, poured the thick, blue gel onto the rock spur just above her trapped boot. "Now pull." Rain heaved. At the same moment the salve did its work. With a sharp crack that echoed over the wind, the rock spur shattered. Rain's leg came free. She scrambled, finding a new foothold, hauling herself back onto the main face. The fractured ledge groaned but held. For a moment we all just clung there, breathing ragged gasps of freezing air. "Move," Valerius commanded, the relief in her voice buried under urgency. That sound could carry. We climbed. The pace was even more brutal, fueled by adrenaline and the narrow escape. But we were together. The dagger had not broken its tip. We reached the top of the ascent as true night fell, the storm still raging. Before us lay a desolate, wind-scoured plateau, the shoulder of the cursed peaks. And in the distance, carved into the side of the highest pinnacle like a rotten tooth, we saw it, the heart of the peak's observatory. A structure of jagged, black stone and ugly, grafted metal, glowing with a sickly purple light from within. Thin, antennae-like spires crackled with sporadic arcs of that same ozone-tinged energy. It was a blight on the mountain, a factory for spiritual murder. We took shelter in a shallow cave, gulping down water and energy pastes. No fire. We were close enough that even the tiniest spark of light could be seen. Zephyr checked our gear in silence, his movements efficient. When he came to me, he didn't speak. He simply took my face in his cold, strong hands and pressed his forehead to mine. The bond flooded with a torrent of emotion so powerful it stole my breath. Terror, relief, pride, and a love so fierce it felt like the heart of the very storm around us. "You saved her," he whispered, his voice rough. "You saw another way." "I am a healer," I whispered back. "I don't abandon people. That's not the world we're fighting for." He pulled back, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "No," he agreed, his voice hardening back into that of the general. "It is not, and tomorrow we remind the Corvus what true strength looks like, not stolen power but courage, not severance but bond." He laid out the final plan. At first light, during the lull between storm fronts, Corbin's assault on the shivering gap would begin. The moment we heard the distant echoes of battle, our signal, we would make our final approach to the observatory. We tried to rest. I lay curled against Zephyr for warmth, the bond a quiet hum, but sleep was a distant country. I stared out at the ugly glow of our target, feeling the weight of what I had to do. To sabotage a machine of that scale with nothing but my connection to life, it felt like trying to stop a tidal wave with a whispered prayer. Yet as I felt the steady beat of Zephyr's heart against my back, and the quiet, ready presence of Valerius, Fen, and Rain, the prayer didn't feel so small. It felt like a root, thin but tenacious, gripping the side of a mountain in a storm. It felt like the beginning of an answer. Dawn came, gray and frigid. The storm had lessened to a bitter, swirling mist. We waited, poised on the edge of the plateau, watching the observatory. Then a low, distant rumble like far-off thunder. Then another, not thunder, the deep, concussive thud of siege explosives, the faint, metallic clang of massed warfare carried on the thin mountain air. Corbin had begun his symphony of distraction. Zephyr looked at each of us, his gaze final. "It is time for the moon, for the pack, for our future." We moved out of the cave, not as climbers now, but as shadows, flitting across the broken ground toward the heart of the darkness. The final act of Operation Frostfall had begun. The dagger, forged in ice and tempered by sacrifice, was finally plunging toward its target. The sounds of distant battle were a ghostly percussion to our silent sprint across the plateau. The observatory grew from a rotten tooth into a monstrous edifice. Up close it was worse. The black stone was veined with pulsating lines of molten silver, like infected arteries. The air tasted of metal, ozone, and a deeper wrongness, the smell of life being unwoven. We approached from the leeward side, where the mountain's own shadow and the residual storm mist offered some cover. Valerius signaled a halt at the base of a sheer, smooth wall. This was not part of the original structure, it was a seamless, magically fused barrier. Warded, Fen murmured, his nose wrinkling, the stone itself rejects touch. Zephyr nodded, he placed a hand on the cold surface, closed his eyes. A subtle tremor ran through the rock and a hairline crack appeared, zigzagging up the wall. It wasn't destruction, it was persuasion. He was convincing the mountain to remember a fracture that had once existed, a forgotten fault line. The crack widened silently into a narrow, dark passage. The mountain remembers its pain, he said, his voice low. Even they cannot erase that, quickly. We slipped inside. The interior was a labyrinth of cold, echoing corridors lit by the same sickly purple crystals. The air was dead, scrubbed of all natural scent. We moved with the silence of ghosts, Valerius and Fen eliminating the occasional patrolling guard with swift, soundless efficiency. Each fallen Corvus agent wore the same dead-eyed expression, their movements robotic. The deeper we went, the stronger the oppressive hum became. It vibrated in my teeth, a frequency that made the bond in my chest feel thin and strained. It was the amplifier powering up. We reached a central chamber that stole my breath. It was a vast, cavernous space, the domed ceiling open to the gray, churning sky above. The lunar eclipse would be visible directly overhead. In the center of the room stood the machine. It was a nightmare of beauty and horror. A swirling latticework of stolen silver formed into a towering, intricate helix that pulsed with captured moonlight and ley lines. At its base was a chamber of clear, crystallized quartz. And inside that chamber, connected by a web of silver filaments to the helix, was a shimmering, ghostly silhouette, a placeholder, a space waiting for a living heart. Around the machine, a dozen Corvus adepts in gray robes chanted in a guttural, grating language. Their leader stood on a raised dais before the quartz chamber, a tall, skeletally thin wolf with long white hair and eyes that were solid pools of void, Archon Malachar. The amplifier nears critical alignment, Malachar's voice rang out, thin and sharp as a scalpel. The eclipse approaches, the impurity will be cleansed from the land, we will gift our people a silent, rational peace, a world without the beast's fever dream. His words were a blasphemy that chilled me deeper than any mountain cold. This was their gospel, that our wolves, our passions, our deepest instincts were a disease. Zephyr's hand squeezed my shoulder, the signal. Phase 2. Valerius, Fen, and Rain melted into the shadows along the chamber's perimeter, placing small, crystalline charges at key structural points. Their job was to create chaos, to draw the guards and adepts away from the machine at the crucial moment. Zephyr and I would go for the amplifier itself. He pointed to a narrow maintenance gantry that ran behind the swirling silver helix. Our path, we had to reach the control nexus at its rear. We moved, the chanting grew louder, the hum more intense. I felt dizzy, disconnected, as if the machine was already trying to fray the edges of my soul. We were halfway along the gantry when a Corvus adept below looked up. His void eyes widened. Intruders at the amplifier. Chaos erupted. Guards surged into the chamber. Valerius's charges detonated with a series of sharp cracks, not to destroy, but to collapse specific arches, showering the floor with rubble and cutting the chamber in half. The roar of battle filled the space, the clang of steel, the sizzle of dark magic meeting the cold fury of Zephyr's power as he covered our retreat along the gantry. We reached the control nexus, a panel of dark crystal covered in glowing, shifting runes. Zephyr placed his hands on it, his brow furrowed in concentration. I can disrupt the leyline feed, slow it down. But to reverse the polarity, to turn it back on itself, that requires the touch they built it for, a touch tuned to the natural magic it's meant to sever. He looked at me, this was it, my moment, the heart becomes the toxin. I stepped forward, placing my hands on the crystal next to his. The moment I touched it, agony exploded through me. It was a vacuum, a screaming, hungry emptiness that tried to suck the very essence of my connection to the earth, to the moon, to my own wolf, out through my palms. The amplifier saw me, recognized the perfect heart, and began to draw me in, to consume me, to power its world-ending ritual. I screamed, my knees buckling. The ghostly silhouette in the quartz chamber brightened, reaching for me with spectral tendrils. Lyra, Zephyr's roar was raw with panic. He held me up, his own power flooding into me through the bond, a wall of glacial will against the pull. I couldn't fight the suction, it was too strong, so I didn't fight. I remembered my grandmother's teaching. When a wound is poisoned, you do not pour more medicine on top, you draw the poison out. The amplifier wanted my life force, I would give it something else. I stopped resisting the pull, instead I opened myself wider. I reached down past the pain to the core of what I was, not just the healer's gentle magic but everything, the joy of sun on fur, the grief of my grandmother's passing, the steady love for my pack, even the broken one. The fierce protective bond with Zephyr, the quiet strength of a root in frost, the righteous anger at the merchants in the gully, the hope for a garden after winter. I didn't give it pure life, I gave it life, in all its messy, emotional, beautiful, painful, chaotic glory, the very thing the Corvus sought to erase. I focused it into a single, concentrated stream and pushed it into the machine. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The amplifier shuddered, the beautiful, sinister hum turned into a discordant shriek. The swirling silver lattice, designed to channel pure, sterile power, began to throb with color, the gold of joy, the red of anger, the deep blue of sorrow, the silver of love. The runes on the control crystal blazed, then cracked. On the dais, Archon Malachar shrieked, a sound of pure intellectual horror. "No, you pollute it, you filthy, emotional beast." The machine was rejecting the input. It was trying to process a symphony with an instrument built for a single, dead note. The ghostly silhouette in the quartz chamber recoiled, thrashing, becoming a kaleidoscope of conflicting emotions. Warnings blared, energy arcs, now wild and multicolored, lashed from the helix, earthing themselves in the walls in the adepts. The chamber shook. "Zephyr now," I gasped, my strength failing. He slammed his hands back onto the crystal, his power joining mine, not to fight the machine, but to guide the chaotic flood I had unleashed. He was the winter storm, I was the living earth, and together we directed the torrent of raw, unfiltered life force back into the amplifier's core. There was a sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering, a blast of silent white light. Then nothing. The hum died, the purple crystals went dark, the silver lattice froze, then began to crumble, rusting instantly to flakes of black dust. The great machine, the heart of the peaks, was dead, not destroyed by force but murdered by the very thing it was created to destroy, a heart that felt too much. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the moans of wounded adepts and the settling dust. Zephyr caught me as my legs gave way, holding me close. I was drained, hollowed out, but alive. The bond between us was a faint, weary pulse, but it was there. We had done it. On the dais, Archon Malachar stood amidst the ruins of his life's work. His void eyes were wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. He didn't look at the destroyed machine. He looked at me, held in Zephyr's arms. "You," he whispered, the fanatic's certainty crumbling into ashes. "You did not break, you bent it. You proved emotion is not weakness, it is a force, a chaotic, uncontrollable force stronger than any design." He looked at his own trembling hands as if seeing them for the first time. What have we been trying to cleanse? It was the despair of a man whose entire worldview had just been obliterated. He sank to his knees, broken not by a blade, but by a truth he could no longer deny. Valerius and the others emerged from the smoke, bloodied but triumphant. The remaining Corvus guards, seeing their leader broken and their god machine dead, threw down their weapons. We had won. As Zephyr helped me from the gantry, I took one last look at the ruined amplifier. It wasn't a victory of overwhelming power. It was a victory of a different kind of strength, the strength to feel, to love, to hope, to rage, the strength the Corvus had spent centuries fearing. We had not shattered their machine with a hammer. We had healed the world of it with a heart. We emerged from the corpse of the observatory into a world washed clean. The storm had passed, leaving a sky of hard, brilliant blue and a sun that glittered mercilessly on the snow. The silence was no longer oppressive, but vast and peaceful. The wrongness was gone, the mountain just was. The journey back to the Blackwood Keep was a slow, painful pilgrimage. We were all wounded, Zephyr with a deep gash on his arm from a ricocheting energy arc, Valerius limping from a twisted knee, Fen and Rain nursing various cuts and burns. I was the weakest, carried part of the way in a makeshift litter, my energy utterly spent, my spirit feeling thin and translucent. The bond with Zephyr was a fragile thread, but it held, a constant, weary pulse of shared exhaustion and profound relief. We were met a day's journey from the keep by a patrol led by a frantic-looking Commander Corbin. His decoy force had suffered losses at the Shivering Gap but had achieved its goal. The Corvus main army was shattered, fleeing in disarray into the trackless wastes. When he saw us, alive, emerging from the mountains, the old general's stern face crumpled with emotion before he mastered it. "The machine," was all he asked, his voice gravelly. "Dust," Zephyr replied, his own voice hollow with fatigue, "and the Archon is broken, the Corvus is finished." A ragged cheer went up from the soldiers. It was over. The return to the keep was a subdued triumph. There were no cheering crowds, no fanfares. The court assembled in the Hall of Whispers, but the atmosphere was different. The air of petty intrigue was burned away by the reality of what had been faced and what had been lost. They saw their king wounded but unbowed. They saw his commander limping but fierce. They saw me pale and carried in but alive. And they saw the truth in Zephyr's eyes when he looked at me. It was not the look of a king to a favored consort. It was the look of a partner who had walked through fire and ice and found the other waiting on the other side. He did not sit on his throne. He stood before the dais, his voice carrying without effort. The Corvus cult is broken. Their weapon is destroyed. The threat of severance is past. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, lingering on Counselor Arden and Lady Moira. This victory was not won by politics or by cold calculation. It was won by courage, by sacrifice, and by a strength that many in this room have dismissed as softness. He turned and held out a hand to me. I took it, standing on my own strength, leaning on him only a little. The bond warmed at the contact. Lyra Reed entered the heart of our enemy's power, Zephyr declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. She faced the machine designed to consume her soul, and she did not fight it with its own tools of cold logic. She defeated it with the full, undeniable force of her heart. She saved every one of you. She saved our world. He turned to face me fully there before the entire court. He went to one knee. A collective gasp echoed in the hall. I claimed you as my mate in a forest glade, he said, his voice now intimate for me but carrying to every ear. But a king's mate is not a queen until her people see her crown. I see it, they must see it too. He looked up at me, his silver blue eyes blazing with love and pride. Lyra Reed, will you do me the honor, not just of being my mate, but of being my queen? Will you rule beside me with your gentle hands and your unbreakable heart, and help me build a kingdom where all kinds of strength are valued? Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. This was the true coronation, not by decree but by acclamation earned in blood and spirit. I looked from his earnest face to the stunned, then slowly softening faces of the court. I saw Corbin's firm nod, Valerius's proud smile. I saw even Arden and Moira, their resistance crumbling in the face of a truth too powerful to deny. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong in the perfect acoustics of the Hall of Whispers. I will. Zephyr rose and from a cushion brought forth by Chamberlain Fane, whose expression was now one of stunned reverence, he took a crown. It was not the heavy, spiked obsidian circlet he wore. This was a delicate, beautiful thing woven of silver filigree shaped like intertwining vines and tiny, scattered diamond stars. It was light, it was a garden in metal. He placed it upon my head, it fit perfectly. Then rise, Queen Lyra of the Blackwood Territories, he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I rose, not just a healer, not just a mate, a queen. The court as one bowed, not just to their king, to their queen. The weeks that followed were a time of healing in every sense. My physical strength returned slowly, nourished by rest and the clean mountain air. The psychic poison in the keep was fully purged and a new, watchful harmony settled over the court. The conspirators who had delivered the raven were found, 2 junior members of the kitchen staff who had been blackmailed with threats against family in outlying villages. They were shown mercy, their sentences exile and re-education, not execution. It was my first decree as queen, and it set a tone. Zephyr and I spent long hours together, not in the war room but walking the outer walls, or sitting in the small, sunlit conservatory he had ordered built off the royal chambers. We talked of the future, of reforms, of the memorials to be built for those lost at the Shivering Gap and in the observatory. The bond between us deepened from a thrilling, electric connection into something steadier, more profound, a deep, silent river of mutual understanding and unwavering support. One afternoon, we stood on the highest balcony, looking out over the territory we were now pledged to rule together. The summer sun was finally beginning to warm the stone of the keep. It is done, Zephyr said softly, his arm around my shoulders. The enemy is gone, the court is yours, the territories are secure. I leaned into him, the silver filigree crown cool against my brow. It's not done, I said, looking at the vast, wild land stretching to the horizon. It's just beginning. Securing is not the same as thriving. There are packs who still value only the claw. There are healers like me who are still unseen. There is fear to heal, not just from the Corvus, but from generations of believing that only one kind of power matters. He looked down at me, a slow smile touching his lips. You are already planning your first campaign as queen, a campaign of gardens, not of forts. The strongest fortresses have gardens within their walls, I said, smiling back. They remind us what we're protecting, not just stone but life. He kissed my forehead, a tender, chaste gesture that held the weight of the world we had saved. Then let us build gardens, my queen, let us build them everywhere. A month after the coronation, on the night of the full moon, we held a true mating ceremony. Not in secret, but in the main courtyard of the Blackwood Keep, under the open, approving eye of the moon. Every pack leader in the territories was invited, and they came, some curious, some wary, all respectful. Beta Frost of the Frostfang pack came. He stood solemnly, his son Kalen notably absent. When he approached to give his blessing, his eyes were heavy with regret. I was blind, my queen, he said, bowing low. I failed to see the weapon my own house was forging. I offer you and my king, my pack's eternal loyalty and my deepest apologies. I placed a hand on his shoulder. The past is a lesson, Beta Frost Nar Chain, let us build a better future, together. He looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time, and tears shone in his old eyes. Together, he vowed. The ceremony was simple, profound. Zephyr and I stood hand in hand, our vows not of possession but of partnership. We spoke of shadows and light, of winter and roots, of strength in gentleness and power in unity. As we spoke the final words, the bond between us, now strong and deep as the mountain roots, flared visible for a moment, a shimmering, silvery light that wrapped around our joined hands before fading into our skin. The assembled packs howled their approval, a sound that shook the stars. Later, as we stood alone on the balcony overlooking the celebrating crowd below, Zephyr held me close. "Are you happy, Lyra?" he asked, his voice a murmur in my hair. I looked out at the torches, the dancing, the faces turned up towards us with hope instead of suspicion. I thought of the healer's hut in Frostfang, of the lonely girl who dreamed of being seen. I thought of the terror in the clearing, the climb in the storm, the heart of the machine. I turned in his arms and looked into the eyes of my winter king, my partner, my mate. "I am home," I said. And it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. The journey that began with a threat in a moonlit circle had ended not just with a crown, but with a purpose, a partnership, and a peace that was not the absence of war, but the presence of a future worth fighting for. Together, we would build it. One garden, one healed heart, one quiet act of strength at a time. Like, subscribe, and comment for part 2.